right? They're worried about another spike of inflation, and seeing with all the tariffs and the like, they are concerned about that.
Right.
And also, until recently, remember, the job market seemed to be holding up reasonably well. And even though wages continue to grow close to 4%, when you have job growth that is barely at the replacement rate, there is a concern that the job market might be a catalyst during this cycle to grow the economy a lot more. And they, the Federal Reserve does have a dual mandate. We get another really weak data print for the job market in September. That opens up the door wide open for the market to price in a lot more cuts.
And that's where I am looking at the labor economy more than the inflation focus. It is the focus du jour. Ira Jersey, thank you so much, with Bloomberg Intelligence. A surveillance correction right now. This comes from Robert. He's up at the Colgate hockey camp in Hamilton, New York. He's a goalie coach.
Yep.
Thanks for listening. It's like, the kids don't get on the ice until 10 a.m. So thank you, Robert, for listening. He was at BLS years ago. He says there's no revisions. Even though we got a revisions column, there's no revisions on inflation. I didn't know that.
I don't know that.
Thank you. That's very valuable. Thank you. No, they revise seasonal factors.
Okay.
But that's it.
All right.
It's not like the job report. There's no revisions. Thank you, Rob. He's, he's back in the old days like Gump Worsley, where they didn't wear face masks. I mean, he's that old. Robert, thank you for that. Greatly appreciated. The future's up 22 right now. They're up 32 earlier, but now up 22. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. A day after President Trump announced he's putting D.C. police under federal control, the Washington Post reports the Pentagon is considering plans to set up a domestic civil disturbance quick reaction force. It would be 600 National Guard troops that would be on standby in Alabama and Arizona to deploy to civil disturbances in as little as an hour. Brown University political science professor Wendy Schiller.
This is coming to fruition what Trump ran on essentially in 2016 when he ran for re-election on 2020 and 2024, which is that, he and he alone can make this country safer. He had been railing against cities and crime. He used sort of the undocumented immigrant crime, but he also used some of the big, more democratic leaning, more liberal cities as, somewhat of a punching bag when he was running and saying, why do we live this way?
Brown University's Wendy Schiller. Authorities saying the steel plant outside of Pittsburgh where an explosion occurred is stable now this morning, and limited production will move forward today. 2 workers were killed in the incident. The plant in Clairton is now working with authorities as they investigate the cause of the blast. This morning, although air quality advisories for the area have been lifted, residents are still concerned. Tom Pike is the director of campaigns for the Clean Air Council.
The concern is for folks who have asthma or some kind of pre-existing condition, and also for children. So children's lungs are smaller than an adult's lungs. It doesn't take as much particulate matter or pollution to cause problems.
Tom Pike with the Clean Air Council. Harvard University and the Trump administration are reportedly nearing a potentially landmark legal settlement. According to people speaking to Boston.com, it would see Harvard agree to spend $500 million in exchange for the restoration of billions of dollars in federal research funding. It said Harvard would also make commitments to continue its efforts to combat anti-Semitism on campus. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. As Paul mentioned, everyone publishing in the street. Neil Dudd at Renaissance Macro with a brilliant note. He doesn't mince words. September locked in with more to come, looking for rate cuts. He's, we're 3-month annualized. Yeah. Dudd goes to 6-month annualized because that's what Dudd does. He's got a 1.9% statistic on headline CPI. And I love what he says at the bottom of his note. He says the problem at the FOMC is a selected group of people that have tariff derangement syndrome.
They're just concerned out there that tariffs are going to lead to materially higher inflation, causing some of the
unknowns that we talked about earlier in the show today. Yeah. Do you know what we have at home in this August? Speaking of inflation, we have seamless derangement syndrome or Grubhub derangement
Yeah,
syndrome.
no, thank you.
Lisa, help me here. I mean, where did this, remember when children went in the kitchen and there was a jar of peanut butter and a jar of Welch's jelly? And you made peanut butter and jelly? What are you laughing about in the control room? This is before your time, Si. I mean, remember, Lisa, where children actually went into the
Yes,
kitchen?
now they
The
just,
great unknown.
they pop it on Crustable in the microwave and call it a dinner. That
That's
easy.
exaggerating, actually, for me. Are Uncrustables good for you?
I would not, I don't wanna be said, to say this, but they aren't the best.
But they're at every
All
softball
I
game,
have to
soccer
say, they're
game.
at every ball because athletes love them. It gives you that little sugar rush, this
It
and that,
does.
but.
Did you know that Michael Barr named his third cat Uncrustable?
Oh, there's another reason for that.
We will see. Futures up 23 right now. Not like they were up the 8:30 report, but nevertheless, maybe modeling in Neil Dutta's September lock. Futures up 22. From New York, it's Bloomberg surveillance.
Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and we are live streaming on YouTube, on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and simulcasting on X Spaces. This show is an interactive show. If you have a question, please put it in the chat. If you're on X Spaces, just ask for the mic, and you will be live on the show. So with that, please help support the work that I do by making sure you subscribe to all the channels. I have 4 channels on YouTube: Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. All the links are in the description of this video. Click the link, make sure you subscribe, make sure you get the notifications. You can also follow me on X and GETTR. I have 2 channels on X and I have 1 channel on GETTR. So that's a great way to follow the work that I do. I also have live streaming on my website underneath Broadcast Live, and I have archives of audio podcasts of some of the work that I've done under Broadcast Radio. So that's a great way to catch up if you've missed a episode. But again, I put all of this out for free. If you would like to help support the work that I do, you can donate on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee on my homepage at the very bottom. You can also be a paid member to my Patreon channel. Again, I don't put anything behind a paywall. Everything that I do for the news and all these videos and telling you how the market is and keeping abreast of international affairs is all for free. I have thousands of videos for free. Again, I believe that news should not be behind a paywall. Well, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I just think that it's just better for the consumer. So it's a great way to help support the free work that I do by sharing the links, by asking your social media to follow me, making sure you subscribe to all the channels, and if you would like, you can donate or purchase the great products that I offer. With that said, let's go into CNBC, where they are talking about the inflation data.
The integrity of this data for CPI, or questions about it at least, coming up later in the show. But first, the number itself. What do you think this means for the market?
There's a couple of things that this data means for the market. The first is to acknowledge that 0.3% month-on-month inflation doesn't sound like a big difference from 0.2% month-on-month, but if we had that number through to the end of the year, core inflation would be at 3.5%. So we would really like to see those numbers lower over time. I think the second thing we need to look at very closely is the gap between goods prices, which, as you mentioned, we expect to reflect some tariff pressure, and service prices. Now, over the past several months, investors have benefited from the fact that even as goods prices have started moving higher, services prices have been disinflating. But in the PMI data, services prices paid have been moving up for the last 3 months consecutively. So I've been sleeping with one eye open on this data, let's say.
So I want to be clear what you were saying earlier, because I want to make sure the audience catches it. Remember, it's an early show. You're saying if we saw the same increase month over month throughout the end of the year, we would end the year at 3.5%.
That's exactly right.
All right, I want to go back to another point that you made about this inflation print. You're saying it will be benign, quote unquote, in your mind, if it's just on goods, but services inflation is something.
Now, for the ones that are watching, that's important, Because if the year-end inflation's at 3.5, then that's above target. And therefore, the Federal Reserve would either need to hold rates or potentially, low probability, but potentially raise rates. Because the target is 2. So if it's at 3.5 and the target's at 2, obviously the Federal Reserve isn't going to lower rates unless there's a major collapse of the labor market, which doesn't seem to be happening. So we're a little bit hot, and I've been saying this going all the way back to late last year, that the Federal Reserve cutting rates right now is not prudent in terms of making sure that we don't print more money by lowering rates and leading to further inflationary pressure. All right, 3.5 is a little bit too hot. It needs to be at 2.7 or 2.5, and maybe the Federal Reserve should lower rates. It'd be ideal if it was below 2, like 1.9 or 1.8, and then it's all clear, start lowering the rates. But at 3.5, it's a little bit too hot. But a lot of people will say, well, the job market's at full employment, and why don't we just lower rates because the interest on our sovereign debt is too high, and the personal debt is too high, and therefore by lowering rates, the servicing of that debt will be less. Well, that's an argument for bringing down rates from the Federal Reserve, but if you bring rates down at not the right time, then you can hurt the economy. So if you bring down rates with inflation above 2%, you're increasing the probability of having more inflation. So it's better to not lower rates. And I've been saying this for more than 9 months. But if the Federal Reserve lowers rates, which most institutional investors think is going to happen at least once this year, then that's going to be an accelerant for equity market, and the equities are going to go up. But keep in mind that just because equities are going up doesn't mean that you have a healthy economy. All right, you could have a healthy economy and equities are going down. You can have a healthy economy and equities are going up, and you can have an unhealthy economy, real economy, and equities are going up. So it just depends on the situation.
Why are you so focused on the services inflation?
A lot of it has to do with the way the market has become more comfortable with inflation prints where goods prices are moving higher. Again, the Fed has said that tariff pressures are likely to be transitory. And so I believe the market's taking those goods prices moving higher as something that might be here for a while, but fade away over the next couple of quarters. Services prices are a little bit of a different story. We wouldn't expect those to be moving higher specifically because of tariffs. And so if we see some stickiness in those services prices, I believe the market would react negatively to that, anticipating that it might impact the way the Fed thinks about interest rate cuts moving later into the year.
Let's talk more about the broader markets. Why do you think we saw money go into staples yesterday, generally a defensive trade? What is the basic sentiment right now? I mean, we do have to keep in mind the markets are still very close to all-time highs.
That's right. And I think any skittishness that we saw yesterday specifically might be related to the dynamic that you and Elaine were just discussing with new measures imposed on companies related to tariffs, a little bit of uncertainty about what that might look like, and of course, uncertainty about the data today. Concerns, frankly, about how all-time highs might not be pricing in so very many risks. Now, what I interpret the market to be doing effectively over the last several weeks is saying, look, we're taking a half step back from the news flow, the day in, day out related to trade in particular, because those provisions have been liable to change and haven't been showing up as meaningfully in the data as we expect that they might into Q4. Now, I want to be clear, we're not bearish on the market, but I do anticipate that those dynamics, the changes in policy we've seen over the last few months, to start making a bigger showing in the data here in the coming months. And so we're cautious about how we take equity risk in particular, given the valuations we're at today.
Something I'm surprised we took this long to get to, the temporary tariff reduction between the US and China being extended all the way through mid-November. What does that mean for the markets? Was that already priced in that this was going to happen? Because we had a lot of guests come on our show, just to be honest, saying they just expected to be extended. What does it mean to have another 90 days for these two sides to talk?
Well, it's certainly good news in the near term, but the way that we're treating tariffs specifically with related to China is, again, we're taking a half step back from the day in and day out, because concern about US-China competition related to economic security, national security, that's a bipartisan trend and something that it has begun taking place over the last 10 years, maybe even more. And so this isn't a development that we expect the president or any future administration to step back from altogether. And so I anticipate over the next year or so that the average effective tariff rate on goods coming from China is moving higher, regardless of what the ebb and flow looks like here in the near term. So that might be a way of saying that this is good news in the near term. It takes a major risk off the table for now, but the trend in our view is very clear.
Actually, one other thing, we're seeing a lot of corporate buybacks. In fact, we're on pace for over $1 trillion in 2025, perhaps a record pace. Is that an underpinning of the market that you think is being under thought about? And the fact that if that slows down, that might have a negative impact on the direction of the S&P and the NASDAQ, specifically because it's big banks and big tech companies that are doing the buybacks?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting development and certainly contributes to purchasing on the margin. Similarly, we see a different marginal buyer in retail stocks recently. We view this as an important contributor to market momentum. Something that's interesting, we do a Black Swans report every year, trying to think about what are the things that could actually happen in a given year that might disrupt the market. And limits on buybacks is something that we thought that this deregulatory impulse that we've seen from this administration so far might actually be balanced with. And so it's certainly an important development in markets, and one that we think could potentially be at risk as we move into the new year.
Okay. All right.
We're just seconds away right now from July CPI. Rick Santelli standing by at the CME in Chicago. Rick, we've got only a couple seconds before the numbers. What should we be looking at?
You know, I think
this was released before the market opened, so I'm just replaying what happened on CNBC when the release happened with the consumer price index.
Year-over-year numbers, especially the core, is going to be quite key, especially which side of 3% it's on. But do remember, much of the hoopla about the big bump in tariffs hasn't really materialized. Is it because consumers are pushing back, or we exaggerated? The data is in, and here we go. Consumer price index for the month of July. Headline number, as expected, up 0.2 exactly. Strip out food and energy, up 0.3 exactly as expected. Year-over-year numbers, 2.7. That's the headline. That's 1/10 cooler than we were expecting, but it equals the rear view mirror. 2.7. Well, how does it compare? 2.8 was February, 3% was January. So we have been sliding. The low for the year in this metric, 2.3. That was in April. And here's what I was looking at: 3.1% on the year-over-year core. Definitely hotter than expected. It's hotter than the rear view mirror at 2.9. 3.1 would equal February. The high reading of the year was 3.3 in January, and that was the highest since May of last year. So if I look at the data on the month-over-month basis, exactly as expected. If I look at the year-over-year, obviously we got a little bit warm on the core. Now, we look at it sequentially, the headline number is 1/10 hotter than the 3/10, and the 3/10 core is 1/10 hotter than last month, 2/10. The only one that isn't hotter is the year-over-year, 2.7 equaling last month. But we do see that expectations were for a much warmer number. And since it didn't materialize, the market's looking at this and kind of looking past 3.1%. Yields are moving down a bit. So we moved down a couple of basis points in a 10-year, hovering now at 424. And if you remember, early last week, for about 4 sessions after the jobs report, we were really consolidating in the low 420s. We've kind of jumped over a little bit, and we're now in the mid to upper 420s, but still, the market's very well behaved. And if you recall, the last several CPI, PPI pairings, once we get over the hump of the data, almost forgetting what it is, just the nervousness about what it may be always seems to give the market some pause on the other side. So, of course, tomorrow we'll have the PPI, but at this point, I would have expected the market would have been more sideways with the 3.1%, but it has moved down, which really does underscore the nervousness out there and how some of these surveys, whether it's business confidence or many of the other metrics that we use, University of Michigan and some of their inflation indices, with all the politics interceding in much of the economics of the markets, it certainly seems though those surveys were a bit out of whack.
We've been told so many times that it just hang on, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. That there was some of that built in, some of the idea, okay, this is the time there's going to be some, because it was hotter, but obviously not as hot as what people were worried about. The market, the Dow was up 50 when the numbers came out. It's up 230 points or whatever, and then
The reason why it's not as bad is, one, some of these negotiations have been put on hold and kicked the can down the road for 90 days or 30 days or whatever. So that those negotiations are in that data. But in addition, not all of the tariffs are being absorbed by either the consumer, right, or even the retailer that's selling to the consumer. It's approximately, on average, if you take the whole economy, right, with these tariffs, the imports that are coming in, on average, it's about a third that actually gets to the consumer. Now, if you buy a laptop for $1,500 in this new tariff era, you're going to be spending approximately, if that 1/3 increase is in the product that you're purchasing, you're only talking about spending about $1,625 versus the baseline of $1,500. So it's not that much. And so you're seeing this CPI, Consumer Price Index, slightly going up, right? For year over year, and then year projection. So year to date and year over year comparisons. So this whole 1/3 concept that Bassett has been talking about for a while is starting to show up in the data. While all those other economists in April were saying, oh, the tariffs are going to radically increase the prices. Well, if it radically would increase the prices, you would have seen it by now in the CPI. It's not happening. It's not happening.
as you said, yields didn't move up. It's not a huge move, but you can definitely see that a couple of basis points came off across the yield curve, right? So what people were thinking, this will finally be the time when we see it. We saw a little, but not that much. Does that summarize what happened?
What's probably going to happen is you're going to see a little bit. You're going to see a little bit of an increase in PPI later when that data comes out, but not all of that is going to be translated in the consumer price index. But what you'll hear from the economists is, well, the PPI is going to be leading and the CPI is going to be lagging, and it hasn't fully moved into the economy, so the inflation is going to be higher. Well, maybe, but I still think it's the 1/3 rule. The point here is that if it's above 2% for the year, annualized inflation, the Federal Reserve should not be cutting rates. Now, because of all the pressure that's going on in the politics, if inflation is in the 2 range, in the 2 handle, like 2.7, 2.5, maybe even 2.8, most likely they're going to lower rates by a 1/4 point. I don't think it's going to be a 1/2 point. There's no way they're going to do a 1/2 point Yeah, they're not going to do a 50 basis point move and lower rates with annualized inflation at 3.1, 3.2. They're just not going to do it. Now it could be a quarter point in a two handle, a high two handle, like 2.8, 2.7.
You know, if I look at all the metrics, as I said, we were hotter in the beginning of the year, even on the hottest read on that year-over-year core. What it tells me is that if you take it very simple, you summarize very accurately. There's been a push that things are going to get worse. You're going to look at a month that's going to be really scary. But most likely, if you look at the entire regime of the effects of tariffs and the uncertainty, we are definitely over the hump. And considering that this number isn't worse than expected, I would say moving forward that your interpretation is exactly correct. We're way over our skis, and what we're really finding is the last mile inflation is sticky, it was sticky, and really in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't break out as that the last 3 or 4 months are extraordinary in any fashion.
So basically, the economists were wrong in April. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nano silver soaps. You can get it in lavender, you can get it in peppermint, also in charcoal tea tree, and in lemongrass. Very high quality structural nano silver soaps. Get a few bars for your household, give them as gifts for birthdays or whatever, but use them. They're very high quality and it helps with your health and wellness. Another great product that I have is a product that will detoxify your body. Zeolite. Zeolite will get rid of heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals, including forever chemicals. You take 3 small drops underneath your tongue and drink filtered water. Do that every day. Small drops. If you want a heavier detox, take 10 small drops underneath your tongue and drink the filtered water. Do that every day until the bottle's done, and do that once or twice a year. But I recommend that you should do it every day, the 3 small drop method. Now, what that will do is the zeolite will bind to the heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals and allow you to urinate them out within 6 to 8 hours. And by detoxifying your body regularly, your endocrine system, your immune system will perform better. Now, another thing that's important is to make sure that you detoxify your house. What I mean by that is get rid of chemicals in your home that you don't need, cleaning agents, paints. If you have to have them, put them in a double container. You can get at the Container Store or from another store online. You can get these containers and you can put your paints or your cleaning agents in the container. It has a sealed rubber grommet sealing lid, and you can put that in another container that is a little bit bigger. That's double layering. And by double layering, you're preventing the degassing of the paints, of the cleaning agents that you're using. Because even small continuous concentrations that you're breathing in or on surfaces can affect your health. So try to reduce that exposure. And if you can, use cleaning agents that are a little bit more natural. Now, some people prefer not to do that. That's okay. But you can detoxify your house by being aware of the cleaning agents can affect your health. And stay away from air fresheners. Air fresheners are terrible for your immune system and endocrine system. They're endocrine disruptors. So detoxify your house and make sure that you detoxify your body with zeolite. Drink filtered water and stay away from processed foods. It's a great way to improve your health and slow down the aging process. And another great supplement that I have is NAD+. NAD+ supplement will boost up your NAD+ levels. That will increase your energy. That will also help to repair DNA damage, because as we get older, we accumulate DNA damage. We have repair mechanisms to repair that DNA damage. But as we get older, it increases the number of DNA damage, and our body needs a little bit of help. Taking NAD plus is going to help with that, help the repair of DNA damage, and for cellular DNA and for mitochondrial DNA. As you get older, your mitochondrial health goes down. The mutations in the mitochondrial health, the damage in the mitochondria DNA starts to go down. All right. Well, you need to repair it. When you repair it, you have more ATP, you have more energy. You actually are slowing down the aging process. Because what's part of some of the aging process? Reduced energy, decline of mitochondrial health, decline of neurological function, decline of muscle mass, loss of bone density, motor coordination issues, memory issues, right? So if you start reversing some of these issues that we call aging by looking at it from a holistic perspective, working out, taking the right supplementation, eating properly, getting enough sleep, you can slow down these things, these vectors of aging. So NAD plus boosts up those energy levels, repairs DNA damage, and protects neurons. Very important to take. Make sure you go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the NAD plus. Super important. And I've been telling people on many episodes that in 5 years, you're going to see a lot of people that have gait issues, motor coordination issues, eye issues, hearing issues, tremors, like a Parkinsonian tremor, Lewy body issues, memory problems. The speed of their thinking is much slower. This is going to happen in 5 years within your network, within family members. There's going to be many people that you know within the 5-year period, starting at age 40, where you're going to start seeing cognitive and motor decline much earlier than normal. Now, why is it happening? A big part of it is what happened, what we went through in 2020. There's some other vectors that are due to our lifestyle choices. The foods that we eat, the overconsumption of digital content, the lack of learning new things, getting comfortable, getting too relaxed and not working the body out. These are things that are aging the brain, all right? But a big problem that the society, especially in the United States, will have is early onset of dementia. It's gonna be happening. And you probably have noticed it happening within your social circle already. So if you pay attention to what I have to say and you approach this problem without fear, but just you look at the problem and you hit it head on. You don't run away from the problem. You hit it head on. It's I can, not I can't. Don't find excuses. And when you do that and you pay attention to your body, there are ways to mitigate the problem. But the key is to catch it early. Because if you catch it late, then you've already have had the neurological decline and permanent neurological death. But if you catch it early, you're reducing neurological death. So please pay attention. And it's a holistic approach, all right? It works, but all you got to do is do it, all right? So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the great products that I offer. I have products that you can get and you stack them together. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. But the key here is it's a holistic approach. You catch it early, you don't have a problem. You catch it late, you have a problem. It's the same thing with other types of diseases. You catch it late, it's a problem. You catch it early, most likely it's not a problem.
Well, you heard us talk about it. Our next guest is reportedly been added to the short list, President Trump's short list on Fed chair picks. Former St. Louis Fed President James Bullard. He's now the dean of Purdue University Business School, a longtime friend of the show. And I when I heard the news, Jim, I said, well, I don't know if he's a hawk or a dove. I just know he's really smart. I've known you a long time. I've been out to the St. Louis Fed with you and everything else. And I think it'd be a great pick. Do you know whether usually if there's smoke, there's fire. Has your life changed? Did someone call you? Is it fake news? Do you know if you're on the short list now? Have you been, Secretary Bessent? Like, are you on you pick up the phone and it's him every time it rings?
I did talk to the Treasury Secretary last week, and he said he was going to be out of the country, but the Wall Street Journal broke the story, I guess. I don't know where they got their info, but I did talk to him. We had a brief conversation, and I told him it didn't sound like they had a process locked down yet, but I told him I'd be happy to, proceed however they wanted to proceed.
In terms of it would be more, I guess, vetting. Is that what's involved? You did more. What would you tell them? Do you think we should be cutting rates right now? Is that the answer you need to give?
I'll accept the job if we set it up for success. If we can protect the value of the dollar, be the reserve currency, that'll give us lower interest rates over time. If we aim for low and stable inflation, and if we can respect the independence of the institution under the Federal Reserve Act, I would say if you want to change the Federal Reserve Act, that's a matter for Congress. Congress has looked at it a lot. They like it the way it is, basically. So I think work within the institutional structure, do the things that we have to do to keep inflation low and stable, and keep the inflation risk premium out of interest rates. If we get an inflation risk premium in there, then we have to pay higher interest rates all the time than we otherwise would. So I think that's the basic case that I would make. And am I a hawk or a dove? I think what I've learned in this is don't be dogmatic because situations change.
That's what I was going to say. That the reason I don't know is because you've been both. I think in the experiences that we've had with you. Most recently, though, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I thought you were warming up to the idea of a cut, and that maybe the risks weren't totally symmetrical in terms of the two mandates. Last time you were on, weren't you sort of amenable to at least talking about?
Yeah, I think the committee put their rate cut program on pause when the tariff situation arose 6 months ago. And now you have 6 months of evidence. I don't really think tariffs cause inflation. Taxes don't cause inflation. And so what you're seeing in the data is very muted effects that are one-time increases in the price level. And so you're not really seeing anything. And the committee's coming around to the view, I think, that this is probably a one-time increase in the price level and is not interrupting the longer-term trend toward 2% inflation. So they're ready to come down. I think they'll cut here in September, probably again later in the year. And as I said last time, I think you could continue that into next year. You probably get 100 basis points by this time.
I'm expecting that there's going to be a cut in October, not September. And it's going to be one cut this year and multiple cuts next year. Because I still think that you're going to have an annualized inflation rate above the 2%, probably at 2.9 or 3%.
Next year, and then you'd be close to the neutral policy rate. So that's a good place to be if unemployment's in the low 4% range and you get inflation coming back to 2%.
an unbelievable position, obviously, for anyone that if you're in that business, Jim, prestigious, and I don't know I know the president might be more powerful, but I don't know after that where you go. So I can see how you'd want it. Seeing the way that what the slings and arrows that Jay Powell has suffered at the hands of President Trump, whether it's deserved or not, is that worth it for you if a couple of years from now you see, dollar stability as the primary, risk, and you wanted to keep rates high? Are you ready to withstand that type of criticism? And it just seems like I'd be thinking about whether I wanted to take that job.
Well, I think you have to, if you're going to accept, you have to say, well, I'll accept, but we have to set this up for success, not for failure. If you want somebody to come into the job and fail, get somebody else, I think. And I actually think anybody on this list would insist on that before they take this job. So I think, but, am I willing to raise rates? I was one of the ringleaders in 2022, and we raised the policy rate 75 basis points. 4 meetings in a row.
Ringleaders are always bad. Ringleaders are perpetrating crimes. Usually, that was a good. That in hindsight, that was the right move to make, right? So
and no recession. You act quickly and aggressively, break the back of the inflation psychology, and get inflation back to 2%. That's exactly what happened in 22 and 23. So that was a good outcome.
No. Oh, wait.
Jim, I'm just curious.
They didn't raise it high enough. That was the problem. They were late to the party because they thought it was transitory. And when they did raise rates, it wasn't shock therapy to the system to keep the inflation rate low. And that is more the reason why we're still above the 2% target. The reason why we have annualized inflation above 3% is because they didn't do shock therapy in 2022, in 2023. And he just said it. He was part of the ringleader. He was one of the ringleaders. The Federal Reserve.
Next question is
about the process. You made a comment about the Fed being independent and what you think that really means, and how you feel, for example, about this president, speaking out publicly against the Fed chair. There have been obviously instances, typically privately, where the president has said things about, a Fed chair at one point or the other. This has been, I think, a different level. What do you think of that yourself?
I do think the president's entitled to his views. He's got long experience in real estate markets. It's all about borrowing money at the lowest rate possible. Good for him. He's got views, but a lot of people have views, and if you don't want to hear that, this is probably the wrong job. But I'm used to the debate, the international debate, really, that goes on 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and so that it doesn't really faze me, or really most of the people on the committee, I think, to hear different viewpoints on where the policy should be. But we take our role very seriously. And we try to get the best outcome for the U.S.
For the United States, the groups that are the most powerful, the inner circle with the president and the president, that circle of board governors and the head of the Federal Reserve, and the well-established representatives in Congress, the party leaders, the minority leaders on the Hill. Federal Reserve the Federal Reserve chairman and the board governors are extremely powerful. Now, in academia, probably the most powerful group of individuals is the Harvard Corporation. Now, if you want to take a look at it in terms of corporations, I don't think I think there's not really a strong coordination. So you have strong CEOs, strong position of certain companies and how it affects the economy. And they're loosely fit under this umbrella of the Bilderberg group. And they come and go based on what the focus is of that year. And of, they usually kind of look at things in a trend. They kind of like, a 5 or 10 year trend. So those are the groups, the cabals, if you want to use them. The dark rooms with the smoke and mirrors, right? Those are the groups to pay attention to. Federal Reserve is extremely powerful.
It just, I don't know, we can't beat this to death, I guess, but we always like to try, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go to whether you think the latest employment numbers, we're still at 4.2. Is there cause for concern yet? And maybe inflation isn't what we should be worried about. Are the tariffs going to possibly cause a growth slowdown?
Yeah, I do think that is what's happening. We talked about it last time. The U.S. economy is only growing maybe a little north of 1% at a run rate. So what you're seeing is you lay on all these new taxes globally. That slows down the global economy. Of course, these firms in other countries have to think about whether they really want to sell into the U.S. or they want to move somewhere else or move their factory. Those are all costly things that will interrupt profits. So I think that's exactly what you're seeing is a slowdown in the global economy. I don't think that will be continue into next year. I think the pro-growth agenda will start to really take hold in 2026, and I think that'll be great. Let's have some less regulation, more of a pro-business policy stance for the U.S. We've got the AI boom going on with a lot of good things happening, so I think we will grow faster going into next year. But of course, you have this transition effect as we've changed our tariff policy to be more aggressive.
All right, we might go to the Georgia officials provide update on CDC shooting investigation. But before we do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get Cleanse. Cleanse is 30 parts per million. It's a solution. You take a teaspoon a day, swish it in your mouth, gargle 20, 30 seconds. They'll improve your oral cavity, your oral pharynx, help with the epithelial lining, help the mucosal barrier, boost up your immune system. Take it every day. If you're not feeling well, take a tablespoon or 2 a day. Probiotics, very important. This is a powdered probiotic that I have on my store. Take it with soft foods or with filtered water. I take it with hummus. But take it every day, and it's going to improve your gut biome. It's going to allow you to absorb your nutrients. It's going to improve your metabolism. It's going to improve the communication between your gut and your liver and your gut and your brain. You're going to sleep better. You're going to be able to focus. It's going to have less brain fog. You have better skin, better hair, better nails. You can see the manifestations of a poor gut biome actually in your skin if you know what to look for. And by improving the gut biome, you're improving your immune system. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotic. Now, I have a great stack. Magnesium and zinc helps to boost up the immune system. Magnesium also increases the efficacy of vitamin D3. And magnesium is important for brain function. And also vitamin C and magnesium. Vitamin C is important for your skin. But vitamin C and magnesium also boost up that immune system. And magnesium helps with the efficacy of vitamin D3 and helps with brain function. When you stack these together, it's a powerful stack to help with your immune system, your skin, and your brain function. Now, again, like I said, within 5 years, or you may be even starting to see it already, people that are 40 years of age or older are going to start having cognitive decline and cognitive problems faster than normal. And it's because of some of the exposures in our environment, some of our lifestyle choices, and the crisis that we went through in 2020. Early onset of dementia is going to happen. Just like you had higher incidences of cancers, higher incidences of issues with the immune system, either autoimmune or having a dysregulated immune system, a weakened immune system. These things all came through the crisis of 2020. early onset of dementia is going to be one of them. One of these emergent issues within the society. You better start getting prepared. Now, how do you get prepared? Bring down inflammation, because chronic inflammation, especially at the brain level, is going to degrade the neuron. So you want to keep that inflammation low. You want to keep those free radicals down. So you need to take antioxidants, but other supplements that will help brain function and keep that microenvironment in a positive way, where you maintain that neuroplasticity, maintain those dendritic connections, is magnesium. All right? By taking supplements that will help your neural function, help with their brain function, are going to be super important to mitigate some of the problems that are emerging after the 2020 crisis. All right? So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the magnesium and zinc, boost up that immune system, help with your brain function, and get the vitamin C and magnesium. Now, people that don't pay attention and are not following what I'm saying, you're gonna start seeing problems. You're gonna see it either in your own body or in your social network, friends, family. It's gonna happen. Now, another modality that's important to help with brain function is proper diet, proper exercise, proper sleep. And that proper exercise is resistance training. All right, activate those neurons that are helping to contract muscle. Stretching helps to activate those nerves that are attached at the ends of the muscle. Balancing is going to help to activate that cerebellum. Super important. Learning new things, because when you learn new things, you're creating new neural networks. And cardio. Now, people would say, why cardio? Better blood flow to your brain is going to create the microenvironment that you need for that positive neuroplasticity. Also, I have deodorants. Deodorants that are dual purpose. They're for males and females. You can get it in citrus or in peppermint, lavender, and tea tree, made from essential oils from the Himalayas. No baking soda, no aluminum, all natural ingredients for males and females. It's a deodorant, but it also helps to detoxify your body. And when you detoxify your body, you have less endocrine disruption, less immune system disruption. Very important. So please go to my store, use discount 5, get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. Let's listen in on what's going on with the CDC shooting.
And earlier, we know that we have recovered video evidence, continue to examine that. We encourage anybody. We know that there's a lot of cell phones out there, that if there's video evidence that would be pertinent to this investigation, or if they have information that they can provide to the investigation, please contact us. As you know, that can be done through our tip line at 1-800-597-TIPS or 1-800-597-8477. They can also utilize our See Something, Send Something app that is available on Android and iPhones. You can attach videos to those entries, and it can be anonymous if they so choose. There's a choice there for that. And also on our, it can be submitted online through our website that we can provide that information if you need it. So at this time, we will open up briefly for some questions.
Hey there, Skylar Edward with CBS News. One of the things that we've heard from healthcare workers over the last several days is that they've been concerned about threats based off of misinformation tied to vaccines. Is there an assessment either from you or from especially in charge about the threat level as it relates to healthcare workers? Has there been an uptick in the days since or prior to?
Threats of that nature is always something we take very seriously when we look at it. We've not seen an uptick, although any rhetoric that suggests or leads to violence is something we take very seriously. So that's something we're very sensitive to. We're going to respond to quickly should we see it in the future. But although we're tracking it, we're sensitive to it, we have not seen that uptick.
Director, we talked a little bit about the investigation so far. I noticed when we haven't seen a picture of the suspect itself, you guys are releasing one, and then because of so many rounds, can you discuss what kind of weapons were used? I never probably two rifles and a shotgun. That's a lot of rounds. Can you talk about how we that on that?
So first question with the picture, we'll be sending that picture out later this afternoon. What we do encourage is that the public remembers the face of the officer this next week, especially. I'm not here to publicize the individual, but we do see the importance of that photograph being put out. It will not be on our website, but we will provide it to you here today. Secondly, on the 5 firearms that were recovered, it was a mixture, I believe, of, I know, rifles, a shotgun, and maybe a handgun. I'm not completely sure on that. The majority, I believe, of the shell casings recovered were from a long gun rifle.
Those weapons registered to him or somebody else? Do you know when they were purchased? Now where?
Don't know when they were purchased. Thanks to great work and quick work by ATF on Friday and Saturday and over the weekend, it was determined that the weapons belonged to the father. And as we mentioned, he was interviewed over the weekend, but they did belong to the father.
All right, we're going to switch over to the Hill, talking about how CNN hates Donald Trump's plan to send in the troops into DC. But before we do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the lozenges. You want to mitigate any throat irritation right away, no matter what the season is, and start preparing, because September, October, that's the beginning of the new wonderful season that people have issues with. Now, I suspect that you're going to hear many people within this season that's coming up of razor throat. All right. Now, it's really important to mitigate it right away. I've been saying this for months. I've been telling people, be prepared, be prepared. It's coming, be prepared. All right. So best way to do it is right when you have that irritation, take the lozenges or the drops. I have elderberry zinc, 21 count, get 3 bags for your household or for work. Blueberry drops in 100 count, a honey and lemon in 100 count, and also cherry flavor in 100 count. All right, get a few bags for your household. The drops are smaller than the lozenges. That's why there's 100 in a bag for the drops and 21 and lozenges. But the key here is that they are very high quality. And the moment you have that irritation, you want to take the lozenges or the drops right away. Okay, let's listen to the Hill.
Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have just a great show for you today. I can't wait to discuss it. We're going to be doing something interesting technologically behind the scenes that we're not even going to tell you.
Yeah, we'll tell you about it later.
Quite an experiment.
So later on Rising, I'll be talking about pushback from Robert F. Kennedy is getting over a shooting at CDC headquarters.
Plus, we will also discuss how the Epstein saga seems to be becoming less and less of a political liability for Republicans.
And Gavin Newsom is issuing a warning to President Trump if he doesn't retreat on his gerrymandering attack. But first, Robbie, what is on your radar?
Let's get to it. All right, here we go. Now, send in the troops. That's President Donald Trump's plan to reduce violent crime in the nation's capital. The president may be announcing yesterday that he would be implementing a 30-day takeover of Washington, D.C.'s police department, and then supplementing their effort with 800 National Guard troops. Here was part of Trump's announcement.
The murder rate in Washington today is higher than that of Bogota, Colombia, Mexico City, some of the places that you hear about as being the worst places on earth, much higher. This is much higher. The number of car thefts has doubled over the past 5 years, and the number of carjackings has more than tripled. Murders in 2023 reached the highest rate probably ever. They say 25 years, but they don't know what that means because it just goes back 25 years. Can't be worse.
In response, Democrats, liberal pundits, and the mainstream media reacted with fury that someone would try to actually address DC's crime problems. The responses ranged from anger over the federal takeover to denial that there's even a problem at all to desperate attempts to talk about something else. Seriously, the national reporters at the press conference swiftly pivoted to questions about Russia, Ukraine, which is the only subject that holds the mainstream media's interest for more than a few seconds. Now, my favorite response was from CNN's Dana Bash, who took the opportunity to remind her viewers about January 6th.
The most violent moment in recent history in DC was January 6th. And it was an attack on the United States Capitol by a lot of people who were doing it in the name of Donald Trump. And it included the people who were hurt, included members of law enforcement.
Okay, look, January 6th was in fact very bad. It's bad when protesters fight with cops, and it's bad when they smash windows, something left-wing protesters did in DC throughout the summer of 2020, excuse me, but the most violent moment in recent history. What does that even mean? Here are the actual facts. Violence in Washington, D.C. spiked massively as a result of the pandemic, reversing a trend of greatly declining violence since the mid-1990s. D.C. saw an unprecedented wave of carjackings and more murders in 2023 than any previous year on record. Now, look, it's also true that violence has declined since then, and that's great. It should be recognized and celebrated, with the caveat that a D.C. police commander was suspended for falsifying crime data a few months back. What's really going on, in my opinion, is that three basic realities about crime and disorder in D.C. are being conflated. First, D.C. has plenty of gang-related violence that is not random. The victims of these killings, which are usually shootings, are typically other gang members. Disproportionately, this violence takes place in poorer and historically unsafe neighborhoods. This is the same kind of crime that many large cities struggle with, from Chicago to Detroit to Philadelphia to Baltimore and so on. The way to address it is to investigate and solve more murder cases by giving homicide detectives more resources and then actually prosecuting unlawful firearm possessions. We have to take away guns not from law-abiding citizens, but from individuals who are already disqualified from having weapons due to prior convictions. Any city that does that will substantially reduce its violent crime problem. Now, the second issue is mentally ill drug addicts occupying public spaces and setting up tent cities. This peaks during the pandemic itself, when vagrants turned Union Station, one of DC's most beautiful spaces, into a shanty town for addicts. Note that this isn't actually the city government's fault. Federal property, like the green space in front of the train station, is actually managed by the feds, who were just not doing a very good job during the pandemic. Thankfully, those 10 cities are now mostly gone. The third issue, and by some measures the most concerning, in my opinion, since it's quite new and novel, there are informal gangs, bands of teenagers entering more affluent, theoretically safer areas of the city and engaging in violence and vandalism, muggings, carjackings, etc. This category of crime is what has prompted Trump's decision to take over the police response. A 19-year-old former employee of Doge was attacked over the weekend by a group of unruly teens. Now, as a citizen of Washington, D.C., this is the sort of thing I'm most worried about. I've seen it in my own neighborhood this summer, which prompted the area of D.C. I live in to start enforcing curfews for teenagers. Anecdotally, a more robust police presence has deterred this kind of crime, at least somewhat, where I live. Now, as Trump grapples with these waves of carjacking teenagers, I'd say that the main thing is for the police to just be more available. I don't want to turn D.C. into some kind of authoritarian surveillance state where every kid is stopped when he gets off the metro, but more law enforcement officers on our streets monitoring the situation will mean a reduction in crimes of opportunity. As for all the CNN liberals screaming about Trump's decision, they may be complaining about it on your television, but they certainly aren't complaining about it in private. On the contrary, it's readily apparent to most people who live in D.C., Democrats and Republicans, that something has gone very wrong in the nation's capital.
The same problem in New York. It's the same problem. And people have been talking about it like Cash Jordan for years. America is turning into a shithole because we've eroded God, country, and family pillars of society. It's really simple.
You're moving here, so you have interesting perspective. You've seen, to heck with it, I'm coming here.
I've lived in North Philadelphia too, because I went to college at Temple, and I think it's all relative, right? When we talk about the numbers of actually things happening, there are cases to be argued in places like Philadelphia where the crime rate was the highest in the country. DC is not even on the top 10 list of where the most crimes are happening in recent history. Okay, and that's the biggest problem here. President Trump
So she's basically saying that if it's not as bad as Philadelphia, it's not bad. People don't want to get out of their house and see rapes, murders, drug dealers, people being pushed onto the train. I mean, people don't want to see that, no matter what the relative change is. But this is the problem with the liberal establishment. Right here, the embodiment of the liberal establishment, this logic that she's using. If it's not as bad as Philadelphia, maybe you don't have a problem. Well, if your cancer isn't as bad as someone else's cancer, maybe you don't have cancer. These liberals are idiots, just idiots.
State of emergency, which is allowing him to use the jurisdiction that he's using to bring in federal authorities like the National Guard. But then the contradiction in which Dana Bash was talking about with January 6th is that there was a long hesitation to bring in the National Guard for people that were also hurting police officers and doing things that were against the law.
Well,
and so I think that
Republicans blame Nancy Pelosi for that because the chief of police has said he asked for a federal response and she turned it down.
Okay, so the buck,
that's not what's wrong.
The buck doesn't stop with the president all of a sudden. The buck stops with Nancy Pelosi. Fine, if that's your argument. But anyway, when Trump's
not my argument, that's the police chief.
When Trump's always saying the buck stops with Biden, and now I would say he has to wear the hat sometimes. And so that's the biggest thing is that we're disproportionately acting like DC is in any situation that big cities aren't in. Like the top crime is happening in Memphis. This is a Republican-led state and a city that you should look at. That if President Trump wants to get involved, also very concerning about his long, extremely long press conference yesterday was the fact that he said he wants to go into other cities like Baltimore, where crime is down, like New York City, and nobody asked for that. And so that also will require congressional approval. And it also is not the same as DC. DC is this anomaly where he can actually come and do what he's doing. But after 30 days, he has to have a longer conversation with Congress. So unless he wants the people to litigate this endlessly, why not engage with Muriel Bowser and figure out how she wants to move forward? Why not make an announcement that she's caught off guard by? I mean, now she has to talk. It's like if you're playing chess and
she hasn't said she's against it.
She didn't say she's against it.
She did not say she's against it, but welcomes that.
Why doesn't liberals just clean up their shit? I mean, why don't they clean up their cities? Why don't they make the towns more affordable, more safe, where people actually want to live there? Why does it take a Republican to basically say, wipe your ass? Anyway, what the hell? This is what's happening in liberal cities. They're run into the ground. Collectivism doesn't work. It never has.
Yeah, but Republican standpoint is to allow states and municipalities to govern themselves. And so the fact that he didn't allow a conversation to happen prior to making some major announcement about what federal authorities is going to do should be against all things. Like you said, you don't want an authoritarian state. You just want to be safe. I think that that's a basic thing for anybody who lives in DC, Democrat or Republican, that's fine. But the problem is the federal overstep and the overreach right now that wasn't necessary. The moment didn't call for an emergency.
It
didn't call for an emergency.
It feels, again, I've looked.
Here's the problem. Every time I listen to her talk, I keep on thinking of Sesame Street. And so I might as well just be Cookie Monster.
Here continuously for the last 10 years and on and off for the 5 years before that. And it feels markedly unsafe here.
It's a feeling. That's raw numbers. Homicide is down 12%.
Yes, up from a anomalous high 2 years ago. But the key difference, I think, it is the only way I can square it. Yes, I believe the statistics. Yes, the violence is down, and that's good. But the violence used to be constrained, frankly. I mean, maybe this is not a good thing, but to areas of the city that are in disrepair, that are disproportionately poor. And that's awful for those people. We should have been doing more to help them all along. But now people who don't live there are dealing with more violence because, again, we're dealing with bands of teenagers.
It goes back all the way to what Giuliani was saying on how to clean up New York. You got to use that whole broken glass theory. You fix the little stuff, and eventually what happens is the big stuff starts to self-correct. Now you have to address the big stuff too directly. But that broken glass window theory, where if you have enough broken glass that's not repaired in the city, then other crimes start to happen. Gladwell wrote a book about it called Tipping Point. So what happens is you got liberals not cleaning up their broken glass.
Is of 14 and 20 who are attacking people at random, stealing cars, way more crimes of opportunity. Not just it's previously it's gangs shooting other gangs, predominantly shooting other criminals. Again, I'm not saying, oh no, that's fine then. People dying is people dying. But now people who are not in the game of crime are being victimized at much higher rates. That's what I think the statistics are not exactly showing.
There's so much for me to unpack here, but I know we're going to be talking about it probably as long as this president exists in DC, so we'll have plenty of opportunity to keep talking about this. President Trump is set to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin later this week. The warning from Ukraine.
At least that liberal dress appropriate. Some liberals, they dress totally inappropriately. But at least she dresses appropriately. Okay. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the stack to help with your immune system and your cardiovascular system. Lignans, super important to take every day. It's an antioxidant. It's going to soak up free radicals. It's going to bring down inflammation. It's going to help your immune system and your endocrine system. You'll also notice that when you take lignans, you recover quicker after a workout. Reduces inflammation, super important. Ashwagandha root helps to control your cortisol levels and your blood glucose levels. Reduces that stress and that inflammation, and that will help to boost up that immune system and cardiovascular system. Turmeric, it's an antioxidant. It's going to soak up free radicals. And turmeric helps to bring down pro-inflammatory cytokines. Super important. When you stack these all together, guess what? You have a very powerful stack to help reduce cardiovascular problems and boost up your immune system. It's a dual purpose stack. And I'm telling you on how to do these so you get the maximum benefit for the dollars that you invest in your body. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the lignans, the ashwagandha root, and the turmeric, take them together and boost up that immune system and boost up the health of your vascular system. Because by bringing down inflammation at the vascular level, you're reducing plaque formation. Or you can just not pay attention to me and have a heart attack early. And then, it's amazing with people that have heart attacks. Almost all of them in the ER, they see their life going flash before them, right? They go like, how would they change their life, or they regret or whatever. But it's in most cases, it's preventable, especially in the United States. But they'll wait until they have their heart attack, and then a doctor comes in the ER and saves their life. And some of them have a big wake-up call, and they get their shit together, and they start to improve their health. And others just, oh, wow, that was close. And they go back to their old habits. They have another heart attack. And eventually what happens is they either die or they go down the road of heart failure, where all of it was preventable. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the omega-3. Omega-3 helps your lipid profile. By improving your lipid profile, by lowering LDL levels and increasing your HDL levels and bringing down systemic inflammation, guess what? You're reducing plaque. This is the reason why taking omega-3 is so important for your cardiovascular health. Vitamin B complex, super important to take if you're 40 years of age or older. Why? Because B vitamins, the first 4 B vitamins, are very important for the electron transport chain. That's where you build your ATP. So you're giving the ingredients to your mitochondria to make more ATP with vitamin B complex. It's going to speed up your metabolism. So you're going to have more energy, and you won't be so fat. And guess what? Vitamin B complex will also protect your neurons. Super important, especially if you start paying attention to the issues that people are starting to develop post the 2020 crisis with their neurological function. Take vitamin B complex, super important. Clarity factor, gets rid of that brain fog, helps support memory. And when you're taking this every day, you're going to be able to concentrate, and it'll help with the dendritic connections, this positive neuroplasticity. You add other holistic approaches like proper diet, proper exercise, filtering your water, staying away from these processed foods. You do the 4 modalities of exercise, the cardio, the resistance training, stretching and balancing, sleeping properly, getting plenty of sleep, learning new things. These are all really important to improve that neuroplasticity, improve those dendritic connections. Take clarity factor, super important. So a great stack to help with your brain, it's the clarity factor. To help with your cardiovascular health, omega-3. And to help with your cellular metabolism and neural protection and boost up those energy levels, the vitamin B complex. Super powerful stack right here. So I just showed you 2 powerful stacks that can mitigate most of the problems that cause so much cost in our healthcare system in America. If everyone did this, we would save tens of billions of dollars in our economy. But people won't listen, and therefore they will have problems. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. You spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last.
For the last few weeks, the effective tariff rate based on last year's imported goods is closer to 15-18% actually, depending on exceptions. So I think that tariff revenue is likely to go up. And then companies, it takes a while. They might have had inventory that is why they didn't raise prices. It takes a while to raise prices. They might have wanted more certainty to know what the tariff number will be like. But I think over the next 6 months, we do expect goods inflation to pick up. Now, your second part of your question, does that include the Fed? I think the Fed might look through tariff-related inflation. Chair Powell effectively said that as much. As long as service inflation continues to decelerate, and it can happen in a slower pace, but if you don't see service inflation, wages, and inflation expectations ticking back up, or, you see continued deceleration there, I think they look through tariff-related goods inflation. They'll say that's a one-time price shock. That's what economics would tell you. And I think they can continue to cut rates, at least until neutral. Once we get to neutral, I think the bar then rises. At that point, I think you need to have the Fed convinced that they need to take rates into accommodative territory. I don't think the data suggests that right now, but that's, they got a long way to go. We're 100 to 150 basis points away from neutral. I think that's why the market's pricing in all these cuts, even with the expectation that tariff-related inflation is likely to still show up.
So, Priya, about 30 seconds left here. What's your fixed income call here today in terms of how much credit risk do you want to take?
So we do like high quality spread product here. I mean, you look at company fundamentals, they're strong. Earnings have been strong. Companies are creative. Once they know what the tariff rate is, they're working through supply chains. So we like high quality spread product. I also like owning duration against that. Because if the economy slows down a little more, the Fed might cut, but it takes a while for that to show up. I think duration then provides you that hedge. We struggled with cross-asset correlations, but I think duration as a hedge to risk assets is still very much the game in town. So I think own some duration and own high-quality credit, high yield as well as investment grade.
Priya, thanks so much for joining us. Always appreciate getting a few minutes of your time. That's Priya Misra. She's a fixed income portfolio manager over there at JP Morgan Asset Management. I think they're about to move into the new headquarters on Park Avenue, starting, I think like end of this month, maybe beginning of September. So
Beautiful building.
beautiful building, huge building. Next time folks are in New York, walk down Park Avenue and see it. I think it's around 48th Street or something like that on Park Avenue. Just spectacular. We've watched it be built over the last several years, and I never thought we'd see it, but it's just extraordinary. So that's Park Avenue. Looking at the market, still green on the screen here, so we'll keep up with that. Coming up, we're going to talk about the cannabis business. President Trump's making some potentially positive comments for that industry. Ken Shea, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Consumer Products Analyst, is going to join us on what it means for the industry potentially and on individual stocks there. We're talking weed coming up. Why not? Listen.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the nattokinase. Nattokinase is fibrinolytic. It's going to break up clots. It's going to help to bring down LDL levels and help to increase your HDL levels. So it's super important to take every day for your cardiovascular health. Super important. And a little tidbit to really drive down the total cholesterol number, if you have a super high total cholesterol number, is to take the red yeast rice supplement, take ubiquinol, high doses of ubiquinol, and taking nattokinase. And within 6 to 8 months, you will be in normal levels, usually. But you also have to do proper diet and exercise. You know, maintain a good calorie intake and do resistance training and cardiovascular training, super important. But you can reverse those numbers without pharmacopoeia. Now, vitamin D3, super important as a gene expression cofactor. It's going to also help to get cells to go into apoptosis. So you might want to stack up on D3 for this coming season. And vitamin D3 also helps to absorb calcium. Vitamin D3 efficacy increases with the absorption of calcium when you take magnesium in your diet and in supplementation. Now, vitamin D3 stacks really well with vitamin K2. You want to take the MK7 molecule, which is this one that I have on my store. Take the D3 and the K2 together, taking calcium. I drink milk for my calcium, but you can take a supplement, do resistance training. It's going to help to build bone density. Another trick to increase your bone density is to use a hard floor, take your shoes off, all right? And you just do calf lifts, all right? All the way and then down, all right? And then you want that heel to come down and you feel that vibration coming up through your leg into the neck of your femur, into your hip socket, and into your pelvis and up through your back. When you do that 50 times a day, what it's going to do is it's sending up a vibration signal in a microenvironment. So when you're taking the K2, the D3, the calcium, doing resistance training and doing these vibration exercises, when you're doing this, it's going to create that microenvironment to allow for the osteoblasts to deposit more bone matrix. And it'll help to speed up the process. Now, your bone to remodel takes a while. It takes about 5 to 7 years to go through its remodeling. So if you have osteopenia, you're not going to be able to see a major change 6 months in or a year in, but you will start to see the changes in your bones after that second, third, fourth year. And by being consistent, when you do your bone scans, you'll notice that baseline 5 years ago to 5 years later, that change, you're going to notice that your bone density is increased. In addition, D3 and K2 help to pull some of the calcium that's deposited around plaque in your vascular system and reduces the chances of further calcium depositing. That's the reason why it's so important to, once you turn age 45 or 50, to have a calcium screen due to self-correct. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the nattokinase, stack it with the K2, And D3, that's going to help with the vascular stack, and then the D3 and K2 with the resistance training is going to help with the bone density. Another thing that will help with bone density is taking the collagen that's on my skin. Another great supplement that I have is C60. C60 is an antioxidant. You can get it in extra virgin olive oil, MCT coconut oil, or avocado oil. C60 is a carbon molecule, 60 carbons together. It looks like a soccer ball. It's called a buckyball or a fullerene. And it will be able to absorb and neutralize free radicals hundreds of times, if not 1,000 times more than one molecule of vitamin C. It's very potent. Take a teaspoon a day, every day, preferably on an empty stomach for best absorption. C60 has to be in a lipid, in an oil, for proper absorption. Now, C60 is going to soak up those free radicals and bring down stress in the cells, bring down stress in the tissues, bring down stress at the vascular level and at the brain level. And when you do that, the tissues and the cells are going to perform better. There's less stress. Now, by bringing down those free radicals, you're also improving your mitochondrial health, and your ATP is going to go up. So you're going to have more energy. Your immune system is going to perform better, and your endocrine system is going to perform better. You'll also notice that your thyroid function, your brain function is going to improve. Why? Because your mitochondrial health in the neuron is better. You'll have more energy, more ATP to produce the neurotransmitters. And you're reducing the stress on the neurons, so the myelin sheath is healthier. So when you do these things on a regular basis, you're going to start noticing your body is healing. And over time, you're going to actually see that you're aging slower. C60 is a major pillar of my anti-aging protocol. Now, what's the pillar? What's the protocol? The first pillar is the max 35, max 14, or cleanse to boost up your immune system. The second pillar is the C60 to soak up those free radicals. The third pillar is the turmeric, the ashwagandha, and the lignans to boost up the immune system and help with the vascular system. And the fourth pillar, boomer boost. It's going to boost up your energy levels and rev up that metabolism. And when you take that core protocol and have that foundation of a multivitamin and probiotics, you're going to start noticing that your body's healing and that you're recovering quicker during workouts. You're slowing down the aging process. It works. You need to invest in your body. If you don't, you're going to have problems down the road. Guaranteed. You will have problems down the road. So you either invest in your body now, or you're going to have to deal with the consequences later. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the C60, take a teaspoon of it every day. I've been taking C60 since 2016. Now, what you'll also notice with some people that take C60, you'll also see at other benefits, like some people have better eyesight, some people have improvement in terms of joint inflammation, stuff like that. So you'll notice that the other improvements are happening in your body, not just on the things that I've been repeatedly saying on these shows about C60, but you will notice some other benefits. Like for me, I was able to not have to wear glasses after about 2.5 months of taking C60. And I was wearing glasses because of stigmatism and farsightedness. If I was on a computer, I had to have glasses on, all right, because of that stigmatism. But after 2.5 months, 3 months of taking C60, I didn't have that problem. So you will notice some other things that will happen to your body that C60 is helping, because it's bringing down that stress and it's soaking up those free radicals, and it's allowing for your body to get back into homeostasis. You just listen to your body, all right? And as we get older, other things start to break down, and you got to address them, right? But if you give the nutrients to your body and you take care of your body in a holistic way, you'll be able to mitigate some of the aging problems that people have in their 50s, their 60s, their 70s, their 80s. But the earlier that you start, the better, because the earlier you start, there's these moments in time for your body where there's a jump in methylation. So if you are healthy and you've been giving your body the nutrients that it needs, and the supplementation and the proper diet and exercise, as you're transitioning into this milestone, you'll have less methylation with the genes, and therefore you have more youthful gene expression, not older expression. Ones that don't do this, they have lots of methylation, and therefore their telomere lengths start to shrink. You have more methylation and less gene expression when you get older. All right. Well, if you're doing the right things in a holistic way, then as you're transitioning into these milestones, you're going to have less methylation. So the key is keep the telomere lengths as, on average, the longer the better, and reduce the methylation due to aging. And that's through supplementation. If you have high free radicals, let's say in your 30s, and you go to that 40-year mark for increased methylation of genes, well, if you have high free radicals in your body and you don't take care of your body, when you go through that milestone, you're going to age faster. Versus ones that take care of their body, they've reduced the amount of methylation as they go through the 40-year gate. So that's super important to keep in mind. The earlier, the better. And there's a compound effect on top of it that happens. All right. With that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and just follow the protocol. You just follow what I tell you to, you'll be fine. All right. Let's listen into Bloomberg here. What's going on? The S&P 500 is trading at 6,411. I still have a target of 800 to 7,000 for year end for the S&P 500, especially if the Federal Reserve lowers rates this year.
Companies here. What's the bull case?
Well, the bull case is that at some point it gets rescheduled or legalized, and that's a long term. You gotta remember, the market as a discounting mechanism is looking, well into the future. Now, if you're a real bull, you look well into the future. These companies at the gross margin line are very profitable. It's about 40, 50, 60% gross margins. That's a pretty good business. But it's when you get below that, they really get hurt, particularly the taxation line. So if you're a bull in this industry, you say, you know what, these are pretty good companies. You need a license to compete. So there's natural barriers to entry. We know there's a demand for this product. It's been around for a long time. So, if they could just get the regulation right, this could be a pretty good business.
Can you also cover the big tobacco companies? How have they been impacted, or may they be impacted with the various tariff discussions that are out there?
Well, the U.S. tobacco industry is really a domestic business. The big guys, Altria, they source virtually all their tobacco domestically for domestic use. So the only exposure to the tariffs is really very small. Some of the materials they use, like their smokeless tobacco cans, tin, metals, things like that, they may get from suppliers offshore. And there could be indirect problems. I mean, other suppliers could raise prices in a small way for other products, for other inputs. But by and large, they can skirt this problem, and it's not really an issue for the U.S. tobacco industry.
Quickly hopping off of that question, I'm going to ask the same of cannabis. Is that more a domestic industry here? Any tariff concerns?
No tariff concern. Matter of fact, it's illegal to import cannabis into the U.S. So,
okay. I mean, the sad thing is that part of the dementia issue that's going to be happening in the United States is multiple. There's multiple reasons. So it's important to dive into the details. And I have to be careful with the way I say it because I don't want the strike on YouTube. The crisis that we went through in 2020 causes vascular problems that will lead to ischemic issues and neural death. In addition, that's about, so if it's related to 2020, all right, there are going to be cohorts, about 75% of those that have this, the early onset of dementia issue. Not 75% of the population, but 75% of the ones that have the early onset of the issue is going to be because of vascular issues, clotting issues, hemorrhaging issues. And therefore, blood flow to these neurons are a problem and leads to neural death. That's about 75%. There's a little less than 25% of the ones that will have, so around 24.9% will have amyloidosis issues, plaque buildup, different types of plaque. Now there's different categories of amyloidosis, and amyloidosis can happen in the brain, and it can happen actually in other organ systems like the heart, the kidney, the liver. So, but we're talking about brain function here. So around 24.9% of those cohorts are going to be through amyloidosis. Now there is a subset of amyloidosis that's prion disease. That's 0.1% or less, where those individuals will be due to the crisis that we went through. All right. So you have that group. Then you have another group where they're exposed to chemicals in the environment that disrupts and causes lots of inflammation, and lots of inflammation will degrade the myelin sheath and neurological decline, motor coordination issues, Parkinsonian issues, and memory loss. So some of it is environmental exposure. Others are lifestyle problems, especially the legalization of certain drugs that will lead to early onset of disease, brain disease. Now we're focused on the dementia side of certain brain diseases. There's lots of different brain diseases, all right? But one issue with this is dementia. So all these people that thought that because you legalize something that it's going to be good for you, stupid. None of that, you're going to have pulmonary problems. Because there's particulate matter that is going to disrupt your air sacs that are in the lung, the alveoli, and you're going to increase the chances of COPD because those cells are going to start to die off and they're not going to be able to regenerate because there's too much inflammation. Because lots of these people that are doing this, because it's legal, are overusing. So you're going to start seeing people having a multitude of different types of diseases because of this legalization. So there's going to be a cohort of groups there that may not have been affected so much because of the crisis of 2020, but because of the legalization and their lifestyle choices are going to lead to early onset of dementia and most likely pulmonary problems. So you have that group. Then you have another group. Now you got to remember, some of this could be mixed together. People that are tied to this lifestyle choice because of legalization and affected by the 2020 crisis. But some groups are disparate. So there's going to be a Venn diagram where some of this is all of the above. But I'm trying to simplify this so you understand my logic here. So you have that legalization issue. You have the environmental exposure issue that will lead to dementia. You have the crisis of 2020 and the aftermath of it. That's through the Viron and the inoculation. And you also have computerization of our life that has dumbed us down, where we're not as active physically and not as cognitively active. And we're in a consume mode, and it puts our brainwave in a lower functional state that leads to neurological decline. So you take these four different categories, and again, it's like a Venn diagram. Some of them are all the above for certain people. And this is the reason why you're going to start seeing huge amounts of people getting early onset of dementia in the United States. So it's sad. It's sad that, you know, it's happening, and it's probably happening on purpose. And people think that they're so knowledgeable about the you know, people taking advantage of them, and they're not going to fall into it. But these people that say these kinds of things, that they're so knowledgeable and they're not going to fall into it, most likely they are exposed to chemicals in their house because they're not cleaning their environment, or they are practicing bad social habits that are affecting their body, their pulmonary system, and their brain. But they think that it's okay because it's legal. So don't be surprised that these people will have Swiss cheese brains early in life. You know, and you're gonna see it. You have these 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds that are doing these things, and boom, right when they hit in their 40s, and that methylation starts to, remember what I was talking about, there are these gates for your brain and for the rest of your body, where once you reach a certain age, the probability of the higher methylation to take place, to shut down youthful gene expression, starts to take place. So if you expose yourself with chemicals and you expose yourself with lots of free radicals, what's going to happen is that your body is going to methylate faster than normal. Now, you can take the reverse and go, if you soak up those free radicals, if you don't expose yourself to those chemicals, if you reduce those inflammations, especially when you go through these milestone gates for methylation, you're actually slowing down the methylation process. So that's the reason why my anti-aging process works. That's the reason why I don't look like I'm in my 50s, because I made proper choices in life, right? So you know, but other people they don't want to look in the mirror and realize that, you know, your choices that you're making are actually going to affect you and the people around you. Let's say these people that are doing things because it's legal, and let's say they have children. Well, don't you think that behavior is going to affect them, their pulmonary system? Don't you think that it's going to affect their methylation? Don't you think that it'll affect their brain function when they're breathing this in as secondary toxins? Of course. So they're harming their child. So that should be criminal, what's going on there. But it's legal. Oh, if it's legal, it must be good. Really? Really? The society wants to dumb you down, to control you. And a lot of these people are buying into it. Okay, so this secondary exposure will lead to higher methylation for these children that are being exposed to this, because their parents are doing things that they think are legal, but don't really care about the ramifications. And then, not just the physical harm that they're doing onto the child, because the parents think it's legal and it's okay. But when the parents can't think, all right, so let's say they're in their 20s, the parents, they kicked out a kid, all right? 20 years later, the kid's 20, the parents are 40, and they start having brain function problems, or motor coordination problems, or Parkinsonian issues. And now the child has to be burdened by parents that didn't take care of their body on purpose. Now it's different when someone has a genetic disorder or, you know, some sort of car accident and the children have to take care of the parents, or some sort of event that takes place and the children need to take care of the parents. That's what a family does. But when the parents do things that they know, just by using simple logic, they know that it's going to affect their body, they have shifted the burden onto their kids. And I'm telling you, this is going to be rampant in the United States based on these four different main groups that I just discussed. The ones that are practicing their legal right to take in toxins, right? And then there's the group that is heavily affected by the aftershock of 2020, the digitalization toxicity of our environment, right? The environmental exposure, especially, you know, certain chemicals that are in the air or in our lawn care or whatever, right? These types of groups are going to see these early onset of dementia problems. But no one wants to pay attention, and then, you know, and then they'll go, oh, is this happening? Oh, this is all happening. It must be a, you know, big conspiracy. It's all preventable.
Fascinating discussion. Fascinating read. We'll talk to Eric here in our studio. Dana Dioria, co-CIO and group president for Investment Solutions, to discuss our outlook on the markets. And Michael McKee, you know him, you love him. He does all the economic stuff for Bloomberg. Get his thoughts on the inflation data. And President Trump naming E.J. Antoni to lead the Bureau of Labor Statistics. What does that mean going forward? We'll get all that breakdown coming up. First, let's get a Bloomberg Business Flash with Charlie.
Thank you very much, Paul Sweeney. Stocks higher across the board right now, with the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all advancing. CPI Tuesday, and the S&P right now climbing by 47 points, 64.20 where we stand. We're looking at a record up 0.7%. The Dow pushing higher by 483, up 1.1%. S&P, by the way, holding very close to session highs on this Tuesday morning, with NASDAQ up 154 right now. That is a gain of 0.7%. The Bloomberg Mag 7 index up 0.5%. Dow Transports, by the way, surging 2.7%. Your 10-year 4.29%, with a 2-year currently yielding 3.75%. Spot gold, little change, down 0.1%. Spot gold down $3 the ounce to $33.39. West Texas Intermediate crude 63.68 a barrel, down 0.4%. And Bitcoin at 119,475, up 0.5%. So what about this morning's CPI report? What does it mean for the Federal Reserve? Priya Misra is portfolio manager at JP Morgan Investment Management. She was a guest right here on Bloomberg Intelligence.
The market's pricing in a very high chance of a September rate cut. I think it makes sense. I think they're likely to cut rates. We still have the PCE report. We have another payroll report. You know, so there's still more data. They're not going to commit to it.
JP Morgan's Priya Misra, interviewed right here on Bloomberg Intelligence. NVIDIA lower after the information reported that Chinese internet regulator ordered local tech companies, including ByteDance, Alibaba, and Tencent, to suspend their purchases of the company's chips over data security concerns. The information citing sources on an update for the rest of the market. NVIDIA down 0.1%. So again, recapping here, stocks are higher. S&P up 0.7%. And yes, our coverage of the CPI report will continue right here on Bloomberg Intelligence. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie Pellet, thank you so much. We appreciate that. As Charlie is just reporting, we've got green on the screen across the board. Let's take a look at some of the stocks on the move today. I'm Paul Sweeney alongside Norma Lima, and we're joined by Bloomberg's Ladonna Hyrick. She joins us here at Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. Ladonna, what are you looking at today?
I'm taking a look at some of the cannabis producers, obviously one of the big stories this week, but a bunch are rising again today after Monday's pretty big day. And I was taking a look at Tilray Brands, TLRY. It's up some.
I'll tell you, this type of shit is going to cause early onset of dementia, pulmonary problems. Now, people would say, well, people can use it for medicinal purposes. Well, if that's the case, then you can go to a doctor and get a prescription. But why are you self-medicating? Why do you think that you know more about how your body works if you weren't educated about how your body works? Yeah. You got to get educated, all right? And if you're educated, someone that thinks that you know, doing this because it's legal won't cause problems with your brain, you're just not paying attention. Because just look at it right now. There's overusage that's taking place, and the prefrontal cortex is becoming Swiss cheese, and the executive function of the brain isn't working, and therefore there's more crime, there are more poor decisions, more aggressive behavior. This is happening in society right now. Stupid. But Bloomberg will promote it because, you know, it can make some money because it was legalized. It was legalized.
Joining us now, Eric Friedman, U.S. Bank Chief Investment Officer. What a year so far, Eric. Did you start with a bullish outlook for 2025? What type of year-end numbers were we talking about for the S&P when we started?
So we had a 6325 figure
at the beginning of the year,
which was tested. It's been tested a couple times. So we stuck with it, and we think we have
the whole time.
The whole time. We'll probably use this opportunity because we're actually ahead of our price target right now to basically evaluate the second quarter earnings season. And again, we think that with the clarity on tariffs, with some clarity on business optimism, we think we're going to probably revise higher. So net, we think that this is still a glass half full environment, and we've been sticking to those targets.
You could go out a hero just staying where you are and not having panic during Liberation Day.
There was an opportunity to flinch, and it's certainly the dark days of April 7th, 8th, and 9th. We felt every tick. But, you know, the reality, I think, Joe, is that what we try to do is just look at the data in and of itself. If you look at some of the consumer activity, without question, your guest prior, we're on the same page. We think the consumers are probably more in an opportunity to grow wallet share.
And this is the reason why you listen to my channel. Back in April, I told you, don't be afraid. Buy in. And guess what? The ones that listened, depending on where your entry point was and how you dollar cost average throughout the whole mean reversion, I said, don't bet against America. And if you paid attention, you would have made more than 20% on your new deployed capital in that situation. Some people made anywhere from 10 to, you know, over 20% return if you just paid attention. I didn't have trepidation. I knew exactly what I was doing. And this was the U.S. Bank Chief Investment Office. Why would you have trepidation? You only have trepidation because what happens is that you are investing people's funds, you're investing people's money into a fund, and it's already invested. You can't, now they're stuck. And because they make a fee on managing your money, they're afraid that you'll take it out. That's what he was worried about. Because most investors, when they see that kind of thing, they'll pull out their money. But the right thing to do is don't put your money in a money manager. Manage it yourself and have a little bit of cash on hand for situations like this where you see a 5, a 10% correction. In the April case, because it was unique, it was almost a 20, I think it was closer to 20% drop. But the point here is you could have made money by just paying attention to people like myself that don't get afraid when the building's on fire, all right? Because you just manage the problem. But these people, they can't react. They can't react. They're not nimble enough. So we're supposed to expect that what they have to say about tariffs and how it's going to be inflationary to be correct when they couldn't even make money on a mean reversion. Trump gave you a gift in April, like tanking the market. And if you had money on the sidelines and you invested it, you made money.
Opposed to really hunker down, we think that especially the lower income and the higher lower income consumers actually in a pretty good spot here. So they've endured a lot of cumulative costs, but we do think that there is some upside, especially as businesses, we think come back to hiring a little bit more.
You probably think that there are certain net negatives or tariffs.
Now, have you noticed?
Net negative?
Have you noticed these economists and money managers? They're trying to talk down the market because they know they lost their entry point. So they're trying to talk it down so they have funds that are coming in to be able to deploy to have a better cost average because they didn't put money in. And so by the year end, their returns are going to be lower than people that were more aggressive with reinvestment within the mean reversion. See how that works? Everything's upside down when it comes to finance.
I mean, there are people that think they're net positive, so the deficit for other things. But let's say you do think they're net negative. Why has the market been so resilient? Why do you still see further gains? Is it because the tariffs aren't as bad as we thought, or are there other things when you look in total and you think of net expensing, or you think of deregulation, or take your pick of the other energy prices being lower? Any of the tailwinds, do those just counteract the tariffs? Or
I think so. It's one of those things, kind of borrowing from your bio background. I think that this whole concept of homeostasis, that the economy adjusts, it adapts. And if anything, when you have a company like Home Depot saying, look, we're not going to pass through all of our tariff expense to a consumer, there are the opportunities for absorption. I think that number one is that most of the tariff costs we think will rest more on goods than on services, which is still, an incremental positive for the economy. Without question, we think there's a cost that has to be paid. So I think that absorption process, that adjustment process continues. And again, companies and consumers are taking things in stride. I think that some of the data we look at, high frequency things like restaurant bookings, attendance at sporting events, attendance at movie theaters, those are still pointing not just to normal levels, but actually expansionary levels. So we do think that, the cost structure of the economy has probably gone up, but we also think the economy does adjust over time.
what about productivity and AI and things like that? Does that factor into is that a long-term thing or is it real?
Yeah, it is real. I think if you look at right now, AI hasn't really been fully diffused across sectors. It's been very, nonlinear. If you think about the industries that have been impacted, things like manufacturing, things like retail certainly have been impacted. Financial services, where I work, hasn't really been as impacted as much. Healthcare certainly has an opportunity for some further productivity enhancements because of AI. So I think that the challenge, though, will be how the labor market adjusts. That is a slow-moving mechanism. So I think if anything, there's been this very gradual diffusion of AI technology. We think that probably out 2-3 years, that's when the labor market will be especially tested.
Do you think that the hollowed out core of this country that sort of spawned all these moves, does it work? And when do you I mean, there are a lot of investment is coming in. The president managed to get a lot of, maybe some of it was already coming, but on the margin, there's more coming in. There's going to be more manufacturing. We are seeing some, domestic companies bringing stuff back. Or
come on, Joe, get it out of your mouth. Get it out of your mouth. I don't understand why he has such a problem talking. Maybe it's early onset dementia. I don't know. The economic clustering is coming back. The pendulum of conservatism is coming back. The pendulum of being a producer, not just a consumer, is coming back. 35 years of economic prosperity for the ones that do paper pushing is starting to end. And now it's about making real things.
How long does that take? Would that be, will the next administration get to take credit for that, or will it be near term?
Yeah, I think you're seeing some incremental growth. I mean, think about where you grew up, Joe, in Ohio, where I grew up in the central New York. I mean, these are areas that had a significant shock in the late 70s and 80s. You're seeing things like A&D put up a factory in Clay, New York. You're seeing an expansion in other spots. So I think it's less of a...
Some of it is organic, incremental growth, and other is a major pendulum switch shift to more producing, which will lead to healthier economic clusters. So the big sucking sound that happened for the last 35 years is now coming back. It's almost like a backdraft that's happening. It's positive for America.
Necessarily administrative driven phenomenon. I think there's certainly some things that this administration has done to create it, but I also think the priorities that we saw during COVID, where we need to have more domestic manufacturing on a prioritized basis, is ultimately a good thing. So that's, I think, is probably a next 3, 5, 10-year type of phenomenon as opposed to a short ephemeral one.
Well, yeah, of course. Because it took 35 years to ship our manufacturing out, it's going to take some time to rebuild it. And if you're an early adopter of this, you're going to make a ton of money. The key is have your own business. Plug into this. Don't be fearful. This is America's back. It's the way it should be.
To people around him and to understanding how the market thinks, market psychology, if you will, which is, one of his areas of expertise, having been a macro hedge fund manager for almost 40 years. That is where it really counts. The market trusts him, and the market, based on its observations, draws these conclusions, rightly or wrongly.
Does he share any concerns he may have about just getting somehow involved in some of the crossfire that happens around President Trump and getting into President Trump's bad graces, or just kind of, because it's such a perilous, those people that fly close to President Trump historically have done it at their own risk, including the former vice president. So yeah, how does he negotiate? Does he even acknowledge that that's a risk?
What I divined from the conversations we had with the Treasury Secretary is that there is a formula for success in the Trump administration, and it means making certain compromises, if you will, with yourself. You can come in with your own ideas, but it is not your job to advance that agenda. Right? So you have to make some compromises. If you don't, and Steven Mnuchin, the former Treasury Secretary, points this out, if you cannot represent the president well, in other words, if you can't get behind what the president wants, the role has no power. What's the point of being in DC? What's the point of abandoning a 40-year career in finance where you rose to be one of the most successful hedge fund managers, and have, for it all to be worthless, have to have no power? No, you want to be able to wield influence and get things done, and that's very much in the back of Scott Bessent's mind. What's my legacy as Treasury Secretary going to be?
All right, folks, if you really want to get a sense of who Scott Bessent is and his importance to global Wall Street, I really highly recommend you read this piece in Bloomberg Business Week, Eric Schatzker. We really appreciate it. He's a Bloomberg New Economy Editorial Director. You can go check it out, Bloomberg. Absolutely. Looking at the markets here, S&P up 53 points. That's 0.8 of 1%. I'll take that. Beats a stick in the eye. NASDAQ up a couple hundred points. That's 1%. So good response to that CPI. A lot more coming up. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the olive leaf extract. Why? Because it's a dual purpose product that's going to help to bring down inflammation and also help you to control your lipid profile. By improving your lipid profile, you're reducing the chances of plaque buildup. Bringing down inflammation helps your cardiovascular system and your immune system. It's a dual purpose product. Good Night Formula has tryptophan, melatonin, GABA, and passion flower. Helps for you to get into 3 to 5 cycles of deep sleep and REM sleep. You need that to detoxify your central nervous system, to be well rested in the morning, and to consolidate memory. If you are sleep deprived chronically, you will get issues with memory. So it's really important to take the Goodnight formula every day, get the proper sleep that you need, and you'll notice that you're slowing down the aging process. Ubiquinol, the most bioavailable form of CoQ10 that you can buy. Most people that are taking CoQ10, guess what? You're probably taking the wrong kind. You need to take ubiquinol, the most bioavailable form of CoQ10. Now, what does ubiquinol do? It soaks up free radicals, brings down the stress in the cell, helps the health of the mitochondria. You're going to have more energy, and it's going to protect neurons. Very important to take if you're 40 years of age or older. Now, get the gel. It's a dual-purpose product. You can get it in the tube form or in the dispenser form. You can use it as an aftershave, a daily skincare. If you're not feeling well or someone around you is not feeling well, put it on your hands, around your mouth, around your nose, around your ears, around your eyes. Lightly coat your nostrils. It stays active for 5.5 hours. You can put it on a cut, an abrasion, or a minor burn to help to heal it. It's a dual-purpose product. Have some at work, have some at home. You never know when you need it. I think you're going to need it this fall. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nano silver toothpaste. Very high quality, whitens your teeth, freshens your breath, helps the health of your gum line, reduces inflammation. It's the best toothpaste that you can get, and it has no fluoride. You know why? Because fluoride makes you stupid. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5, get $5 off any order. And you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last.
Joining us now to discuss all of this is White House Council of Economic Advisors Chair and President Trump's new pick to replace Fed Governor Kugler, Stephen Myron. It's good to have you, Chair Myron. First, you must be pleased to see another inflation number that comes in a bit light and does not show a lot of evidence of tariff pass-through.
Good morning, and thanks for having me. And yes, I can tell you that we're very happy to see that inflation continues to be well behaved. Since the president took office in February, CPI inflation is running at a 1.9% annualized rate, which is a totally normal pattern of behavior for inflation and for prices. And as you pointed out, look, there's just still continues to be no evidence whatsoever of any tariff-induced inflation. I think lots of folks who are expecting that, who are predicting doom and gloom, it just hasn't panned out, and it continues to not pan out for them.
There's a little evidence. I saw it in coffee, I saw it in tomatoes, you see it in photography, equipment, that sort of thing. But to your point, it's not filtering through into the headline numbers. And even the goods prices look better in July than they did in June. I guess the question, Chair Myron, is it coming? Because a lot of
you're going to see a little bit of it. On average, it's going to be a third. Sometimes a little less, sometimes a little bit more. But on average, it's going to be a third of what the tariff increase was. So that means that if you're buying an expensive item, you're going to be paying like a laptop. A $1,500 laptop is going to cost about $1,625. That's your absorption of the cost. It's not that big of a deal. And again, tariffs bringing in $50 billion a month. If that's the number, you're talking about not needing to tax more and not needing to issue debt. Now, if there's debt issuance, you're going to pay more than your share of that 1/3 for the tariff. If they issue debt and you're doing interest payments on that debt. Here's a fun fact, all right? The United States keeps on rolling the debt of World War II. 1940s. Now people would say, well, they issued bonds. And those bonds, let's say if it was a 30-year bond, eventually it would have been paid off. No, because the debt keeps on growing. And so they keep on rolling the debt. And that's the reason why we're $36+ trillion in debt. Now, maybe it makes sense to tariff a little bit so we don't issue so much debt, because we pay much more by issuing debt than paying a certain percentage of a tariff in consumer products.
still say, all right, well, you know, these companies are still working off of their inventories. They had months of inventory. They can't absorb it indefinitely.
Well, there will always be relative price changes. There will always be one good or service gets more expensive, another one gets cheaper. That will always happen. But at the aggregate level, when you look holistically across the inflation data, there's just no evidence of it whatsoever. And that's an exact repeat of what happened in 2018, 2019. When again, the same doomsayers, the same Cassandras were saying exactly the same thing and didn't pan out for them then. Thus far, it's not panning out for them again. You know, could it happen in the future? As I've said before, you know, in any, you know, never rule out anything, but thus far there's no evidence of it. And the entire burden of argumentation is on the people who have been waiting since January 20th, the tariffs began, right? It's been a gradual process of different tariff regimes, but we started putting tariffs on various countries on January 20th and still hasn't panned out.
No, it hasn't panned out. But, you know, one thing that did surprise people, core numbers were a little bit hotter. I mean, nothing crazy, nothing extreme, but that core number is now the highest year over year since, I believe, January. So what does that tell you? I mean, does it concern you at all that it looks like the inflation numbers pretty much bottomed earlier in the year?
Well, let me say a couple things. First of all, if you look at core, as you just mentioned, two of the strongest categories in this month in terms of inflation were used cars and airfares. And neither of those have anything to do with tariffs. We don't import used cars from abroad in large scale, and airfares are on domestic services, basically, right? So they couldn't be farther removed from things. In terms of core overall, you know, look, we've been doing a lot of thinking about just how much of this inflation is due to the illegal immigration that's occurred in the last few years. Our calculations are that the massive insurge of renters into an only sluggishly adjusting housing supply probably boosted rents by about 4 or 5%, right? And that's a significant contribution to overall inflation at a time when the housing stock adjusts only slowly, inflation is very strong, and you basically got an unchecked border with people just streaming over this country. So we think that there's a very strong reason for thinking a very profound service disinflation coming up in the near future as net migration has come to zero because of the president's strong border policies, and as we start sending numbers of them home, right? And that's on top of the president's other policies of deregulation, expanding the capital stock through the incentives for investment in the One Big Beautiful Bill, energy abundance, keeping energy prices down. There's a whole of government approach to disinflationary policy that's going to be working its way through the inflation data and having a very profound effect in the near future.
Why wouldn't used cars and pricing in used cars be affected by an increase in prices in new cars?
Well, but there was no increase in prices in used cars this month in terms of
as an overall working theory, wouldn't you assume that if new cars get more expensive, people would turn to used cars, which would then inflate their value?
Yeah, they're substitutes, and the logic like you're describing would happen if the price of used cars had been going up, but the premise is false. If the price of new cars had been going up, but the premise is false. There wasn't a material increase in new car inflation on this month, which means it's just an aberration of the data, or maybe it's sort of, you know, previous lags, correlation between different measures of used cars working their way through the system. But it's just really difficult to get to a point at which you could say any of the inflation is due in any economically meaningful sense to the tariffs.
Should we trust this data? The president cast a lot of doubt, politicized the head of the BLS. That's where these numbers are coming from.
Well, look, not all, but most economic data ultimately comes from surveys. And so there's always going to be an element of noise. There's always going to be an element of uncertainty. And unfortunately, that element of noise and uncertainty has increased in recent years. If you look at, we can sort of speak about revisions in the payroll, in the jobs data, because we get revised data for that. We don't really get revised data for the CPI data. Those never really get revised. The final number is the initial number is the final number. Of course, the seasonal factors get revised, but not the underlying data. And if you look at the jobs data, though, where we can speak of this, the birth-death model, for example, one of the big drivers of how you think about how job creation has occurred, has come from a run rate of about 5,000 or so annual jobs in the annual revision for the 15 years running into COVID, to being about almost 300,000 in the last couple of years, right? So that's an increase of about 70 times in the size of that error, right? So this is a degradation in the quality of the statistics that have occurred. And I think the president is dead right when he says we need to fix this. We need to make these statistics reliable. We need to make them believable. We need to make them credible. And I'm really delighted that we're shaping up to be able to do so.
What do you think drives response rates higher?
Well, I think that, and to be clear, this is not my equity, this is not my policy domain. But I think that we can start thinking about incentive schemes to drive response rates higher. I think that we can start thinking about ways to optimize the collection system, optimize the survey system, optimize the timing of responses. I think that we should be thinking critically about these questions.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly response rates collapsed in COVID and just was never able to get back to those prior highs, which were already eroding before the pandemic. A lot of attention was paid to your paper from last year about Fed independence in the last few days. Can you talk about how you expect to be questioned about it on the Hill and what your framework would be as to what kind of Fed is acceptable, as you say?
Well, I mean, look, I've always been clear that independence of the Fed is of paramount importance. But I do have a nomination going in front of the Senate, and I really can't speak about that and get ahead of the Senate process. And so I'm very happy to talk about administration economic policy. I'm very happy to talk about the economic data and the unrolling of the economy. But talking about the Fed is just not something I can get into right now.
Do you think you will get in the Fed before September 17th, which is the next meeting?
Again, that's up to the Senate, and I can't speak for them.
Do you think, I mean, look, the market, as I mentioned, is like 90% certain that we're going to get a rate cut in September. Though, there's plenty in this report, as evidenced by Carl Barkin's comments at the top of the hour. There's still a case, don't you think, to wait and see on tariff inflation, on services inflation, which we saw heat up a little bit in the rent prices and the dental and medical cost area, that sort of thing. I mean, do you think it's a slam dunk that they're going to be cutting?
Look, as I said a moment ago, I do think that inflation has been well behaved, particularly since the president took office and completely changed the slate of economic policies in every part of a policy that the executive branch can control directly from the presidency. However, as I said a moment ago as well, I just can't comment on current interest rate policy at the moment.
So who's paying? So I have shown yesterday. I showed a chart. 29 billion was collected into the U.S. Treasury in tariffs last month, and it's just numbers above 150 billion year to date. Who's paying for it? We're not seeing it show up in a meaningful way in consumer inflation.
Yeah, well, look, in the long run, the arguments about tax incidence will hold sway. And in the tax incidence literature in public finance, the field of economics, the basic result is that the more inflexible party bears the burden of a tax or a subsidy or whatever it is, right? And at the end of the day, the American public is very flexible in terms of who they buy from. We can buy from other countries that we said varying high or low tariff rates on, and we can make stuff at home. That flexibility gives us the ability to shift the economic burden of something like a tariff onto the country that we're tariffing. So in the long run, I have every confidence that these tariffs will be borne, that the incidents will be borne by the countries that we're tariffing.
And then as far as whether it's working or not, do you have enough evidence at this point that the investment is coming through in a meaningful way to shift, say, the manufacturing outlook, the investment outlook in this country, that it's working in that way?
I think the commitments that the president has brought home in part of these historic trade deals speak for themselves. $500 billion here, $600 billion there, $1 trillion somewhere else. Pretty soon you're talking about real money. And those are real commitments. Those are coming through. The tax incentives in the One Big Beautiful Bill to full expensing on structures, full expensing on R&D and new factories. All of those are incredibly powerful, and it's going to follow through.
Stephen Myron, we appreciate the time today. Thank you very much. It's good to see you.
All right, we're going to go to Bloomberg, but please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the collagen. Collagen is a powder. You mix it with soft foods, filtered water, a smoothie, or even with milk. Do resistance training. It'll help with your musculature, your bone density, your joint health, your cartilage, but also it'll help with your skin, your nails, and your hair. So it's a dual purpose product. Take it every day. Go to my store and get the collagen. Myotrol, super important to take if you're 40 years of age or older to build muscle and to maintain muscle. It also will help the health of your mitochondria. It has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans, bring down that inflammation, boost up the health of that mitochondria, and help with the gene expression to build muscle. Super important. It stacks really well with Gladiator Barley and Boomer Boost. Resveratrol. Resveratrol is an antioxidant. It's going to soak up free radicals. It's going to help with the health of the mitochondria. It's going to boost up your energy levels. It helps with youthful gene expression, and it also helps to get rid of cells that are in senescence. I've been taking resveratrol for decades. It stacks really well with C60, NAD plus, ubiquinol, clarity factor. So take resveratrol. Digestive enzyme complex. You're 40 years of age, guess what? Your pancreas doesn't work as well. Digestive enzyme complex is going to help to break up those carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids so you can digest properly and reduce the load on that pancreas. It also has bromelain in it. Bromelain is an enzyme that will help to break up clots because it's fibrinolytic. In addition, digestive enzyme complex has proteolytic enzymes that help to break up glycoproteins. That was really important when I told you to take digestive enzyme complex in 2020. Why? Because bromelain will break up the clots, and the proteolytic enzymes breaks up the glycoprotein. Oh, the spike, remember that? So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the digestive enzyme complex. So a great stack would be the collagen for your musculature, your muscles, you know, your muscles, your bones, your joint health, your skin, your hair. Myotrol for your muscle gene expression, resveratrol for youthful gene expression, and digestive enzyme complex for breaking up proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. See what's happening here. It's the mayor. Mayor's talking about something. Mayor Adams, let's listen in.
We all move around like we are perfect, but in fact, we're not. All of us are going through something. You know, all of us are having those moments. And, you know, when you come and just give us your story, it compels all of us to feel a level of comfort of that I can be who I am. You may not have heard it, but I'm perfectly imperfect. Perfectly imperfect. You know, but I'm dedicated.
He's boring me. All right, let's go to CNN. They're talking about Trump and Putin deal.
President Trump seems to be tempering expectations ahead of his meeting with Vladimir Putin Friday in Alaska. Trump hoping it will help end Russia's war in Ukraine, but notably he suggested it will not include Ukraine's president, Vladimir Zelensky.
This is really a feel-out meeting a little bit. And President Putin invited me to get involved. He wants to get involved. I believe he wants to get it over with. Now, I've said that a few times, and I've been disappointed. We're going to see what he has in mind. And if it's a fair deal, I'll reveal it to the European Union leaders and to the NATO leaders and also to President Zelensky. I think out of respect, I'll call him first. And then I'll call them after. And I may say, lots of luck, keep fighting. Or I may say we can make a deal.
My sources on this story tonight, former CNN Moscow bureau chief Jill Doherty and CNN military analyst Colonel Cedric Layton. Jill, let me start with you. So if the president is serious about this, as wanting to use this as a way to feel Putin out, what opportunity do you think that provides to Vladimir Putin?
Well, I mean, the president has had numerous opportunities to feel him out. They've had, I believe it's 5 conversations by phone. And so this is obviously, it's a personal meeting, but I think it gives advantage to Putin. And that is because Putin can be a very convincing person. And that is going to be his mission when he goes to Alaska, to convince President Trump that the real obstacle here is not Vladimir Putin. The real obstacle is Volodymyr Zelensky. And that, I think, is what he wants to do. Just blame it on Zelensky. So it's an advantage to Putin. And I would have to question, why do you need a summit at this point if things are so unclear? There are very few details about this that are known at this point.
One big piece of this, Colonel Layton, is the location, right, of this summit in Alaska, a former Russian territory, very close to Russia. Also worth noting, this is the first time that Vladimir Putin will be on NATO-controlled soil since that arrest warrant went out from the International Criminal Court in 2023. How are you thinking about this from a strategic perspective? Because this region of the world is also very strategically important for the United States.
Yeah, it certainly is, Casey. And one of the big things, of course, is the Arctic, when it comes to minerals, rare earth minerals, oil, gas, all of that is up in the Arctic. And not only have the Russians been interested in that area for a long time, but the Chinese are also very interested in that. But when it comes to Putin going to Alaska, from a domestic standpoint, as Jill has pointed out before, the Russians are ecstatic about this. They love the fact that this is a former Russian territory that, oh, by the way, they would like to have back, at least some elements of Russian society want to have back. Now, Trump could turn the tables on that if he so chose and make it very clear that Putin is coming to America, literally. And he's doing, this basically at Trump's bidding, but I don't think that's going to happen. So from a strategic standpoint, I think it may be a lost opportunity for Trump to basically, in essence, put Putin in his place. That's not going to happen. Putin will have advantages, as Jill mentioned, and it's going to be a very critical element to this. This is going to really weaken the chance that the United States has of influencing the outcome of the Ukraine war if it's not handled properly.
And Jill Doherty, of course, one of the big questions here, if not the central question, is this idea of swapping land, which the president has raised. And he spoke about this today at the news conference, and it also came up when it was almost a compare and contrast between Vladimir Putin and President Zelensky of Ukraine. Let's listen to how the president talks about each of these men at this press conference, and then I'll ask you about the other side. Let's watch.
I thought it was very respectful that the president of Russia is coming to our country as opposed to us going his country or even a third party place. And I get along with Zelensky, but I disagree with what he said. Very, very severely disagree. This is a war that should have never happened, wouldn't have happened. I was a little bothered by the fact that Zelensky was saying, well, I have to get constitutional approval. I mean, he's got approval to go into war and kill everybody, but he needs approval to do a land swap.
What do you make of how he talked about each of those men there?
Well, he actually does have to get approval constitutionally for a land swap. If there's to be any type of transfer of land, according to the Ukrainian constitution, he does have to have that approved constitutionally. So I think the American president is dismissing that, perhaps not understanding that really is part of the deal. And I think the future of Zelensky is really, really important in all of this. We don't talk about it a lot, but I think one of the things that the Russians are trying to do is put Zelensky in a really difficult situation. I mean, if he agrees to a land swap, which still is very unpopular among Ukrainians, then he risks political problems at home, which is exactly what the Russians want. And then if he doesn't do it, then he risks alienating President Trump, and that creates military and geopolitical problems for him. So this is very, very sticky for Zelensky. And I think the Russians, again, as Cedric was saying, Putin's very happy with this. Anything that he can do to make life difficult for Zelensky, anything that he can do to divide the United States from Europe and from Ukraine is perfect for Vladimir Putin.
Details are scarce about Friday's war summit between President Trump and Putin. We do know Ukraine's President Zelensky, he will not be there. President Trump is tamping down expectations for a ceasefire agreement between Russia and Ukraine. He claims that he'll know within 2 minutes if a deal can be made. The Ukrainians have made their position clear, telling Secretary of State Marco Rubio an unconditional ceasefire is required before serious peace talks can begin, and they don't believe Putin is serious.
He is definitely not preparing for a ceasefire or an end to the war. Putin is determined only to present a meeting with America as his personal victory and then continue acting exactly as before, applying the same pressure on Ukraine as before.
Group chat is back. We're bringing in CNN Global Affairs analyst Kim Dozier to the group. We just heard Zelensky lay it out in a way I've heard it lots before. The win was just getting the meeting. Putin isn't really serious. So to you, what's left for Trump to feel out, so to speak?
Hard to tell because nothing Putin has signaled shows that he's willing to compromise on anything. We had mixed signals out of the Witkoff-Putin meeting that's preceded this. Basically, Russia's position seems to be if you give up most of Donetsk, part of the Donbass in eastern Ukraine, then we'll have a ceasefire, a temporary ceasefire. And U.S. officials are talking about Ukraine having to swap some territory. And Trump, once again, in his comments yesterday, blamed Zelensky for somehow starting the war. He's reset back to that Russian talking point position. As opposed to recognizing this as a war of aggression, where a sovereign country was
Is that
invaded.
surprising going into a meeting with Putin?
Surprising in that Putin has won this meeting on U.S. territory without giving any concessions. Meanwhile, India is getting 50% tariffs because it continues to sell oil to Russia. So the Trump administration is punishing a friend while letting Putin have this meeting of great consequence with nothing given up beforehand.
Gary, you were calling this improv diplomacy.
Yeah, I mean, this is just so weird the way that Donald Trump does international diplomacy. The president of the United States does not walk into a feel-out meeting. Like, you have weeks and months of staff work and diplomacy by trained diplomats and.
But they've had a lot of phone calls.
Well, but the president, normally when you set up a summit like this, there's a point to it. You sort of know whether you're going to have a deliverable or an output. You have sort of the deal, the outline of the deal already agreed upon. And here it's sort of Donald Trump just on a couple of days' notice, randomly calling up one of the world's most notorious international war criminals and inviting him to U.S. soil, which is just incredible.
I respectfully disagree. I think there is absolutely no way that either of these leaders would be meeting unless there's been a lot. I mean, I work in the White House. A lot of work has gone in from the Biden administration through the Trump administration. There's no way either groups are letting their leaders come in. I think what's the tipping point, going back to your India sanctions as well as in Brazil, which are the two biggest countries, obviously, that will impact Russia oil or Russia gas, is I think that's the tipping point of what brought them together. And also the fact that we're going to put more secondary sanctions through Congress if something doesn't happen soon when they come back in September.
He wants his political win in the worst way. He wants to just be able to say, I ended this it would have never, he said it yesterday. He said, this would have never begun under my watch. And he just wants to be able to say, it's ended because of me.
That's an oxymoron. That's moronic to have a cowboy hat from the South and you're a Democrat. All right, let's listen to Wolf Blitzer.
A brand new measure of inflation and how far you can stretch your dollar. This morning's new numbers deliver some good news. Inflation did not rise as much as expected last month. The consumer price index held steady at 2.7%. That's compared to last July. And it's the same inflation rate as the month before. Let's go to CNN business and politics correspondent Vanessa Yurkevich. Vanessa, what does this new CPI number tell us?
Well, it shows us that inflation really held steady amidst these historic tariff levels that we have not seen since the 1930s. As you mentioned, Wolf, on an annual basis in July, inflation up 2.7%, and on a monthly basis, inflation up 0.2%. That's really a mirror image to what we saw in the previous month of June. Now, when we look at key categories that we track regularly, energy, food, and shelter, take a look what happened here. Energy was down 1.1%, led because gas prices fell by 2.2%. Food flat. So prices at the grocery store actually came down by 0.1%. And then shelter, that's what we pay for rent. We saw an increase there. That's the biggest share of this report, up 0.2%. But when we look at core inflation, we can see where the tariffs, where the price increases are starting to take effect. It was hotter than expected and the highest level on an annual basis since February, up 3.1% on an annual basis, up 0.3% month over month in July. Key categories that we have been tracking because of the tariff pressures are toys, furniture, appliances, apparel. You can see almost all of those up a little bit, except for appliances, which are down by 0.9%. I just spoke to the CEO of a major US retailer who said that he's actually not surprised that prices are rising slower than expected. There's some feathering going on with prices where things can go up one month, things can come down another month. And well, that is in reaction to the volatility around the tariffs, changing week to week, even day to day. But as a whole, inflation looking tame amidst these really historic tariffs, Wolf.
And Vanessa, it's I think important to point out that these new numbers come from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. That's the same agency that President Trump criticized without evidence of manipulating numbers to support Democrats. But will he be happy about these new numbers?
Well, we'll wait for that Truth Social post to see if he is indeed happy. But he didn't just fire the commissioner of the BLS. There have been a lot of layoffs at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The people who are involved in collecting this inflation data, so much so that they suspended collecting data in 3 key metro areas and have cut back in surveys and collections in 15% of the rest of the country. So economists have said that this could be a little bit of a cloudy report, and we may see more volatility in the months ahead, Wolf.
Americans, Vanessa, are also dealing with record high beef prices this summer. And you had a chance to speak to the CEO of Omaha Steaks. That's the home delivery service. So what does he say about where these prices are going?
Prices in the month of July for beef have spiked up 2.4%, and on an annual basis, up 11.5%. That is some of the steepest price increases that we have seen in this inflation report. I did speak to the CEO of Omaha Steaks, who told me this has been a long time coming, and he's not sure prices are going to fall anytime soon. Take a listen to our conversation.
Well, we're at the lowest herd size in 70 years. And at the same time, demand is an all-time high. I don't expect the herd rebuild to really start turning the corner until Q3 of 26. So, we're in for quite a long haul here until we start to see some relief in retail, grocery, and at other specialty providers like Omaha Steaks of beef costs coming down.
How is the beef market impacted by tariffs?
In ground beef in America, 8 to 20% is imported from outside the United States. Without foreign imports of lean trim, America could not support, at least today, could not support, America's demand for ground beef. So, that's why the price is going up, because the demand is there. And so companies that source foreign beef are incented to do it, despite the price.
And so we heard right there, prices continuing to rise and likely not to fall until sometime next year. Also, one of the prices that we've been tracking is coffee prices. That, along with beef, is on the rise because of weather conditions, but also because some of those significant tariffs put on our trading partners like Brazil, a 50% tariff, Wolf, where we get a lot of our coffee.
Well, good point, Vanessa Yurkevich. Thank you very much.
With us now, senior markets reporter for Axios, Madison Mills. Madison, thanks for being here. I first just give us some context. Vanessa just laid it all out for us. What does this say to you? Well, what's really interesting is we're seeing the stock market rallying this morning, and that's no surprise because investors have been very glass half full since really those lows that we saw back in April. But as your reporter just so smartly laid out, this is sort of a mixed print when you look under the hood. The core CPI that strips out some of the volatile sectors like food and energy, that came in hot, but the headline number came in cold. So for the Federal Reserve, how do you view these inflation numbers? Is it actually good news for the path forward on inflation?
And so what do you think, how will they internalize that? Because as they weigh any sort of rate cut?
Well, and I'm reading emails from sources as I'm on set with you right now, and they are telling me that this is a dovish print, meaning the Federal Reserve has the option to view this as an excuse to cut interest rates or as reason to cut interest rates. But then from Mohammed El-Arian, one of my favorite sources on Wall Street, a bond legend, he is saying that divergence between the headline and the core number, that's going to make it more difficult for the Federal Reserve to reach consensus. And then at the same time, you have the labor market numbers that came in a little bit rough in the last jobs report. And the Fed looks at unemployment and inflation. So they're in a very difficult spot right now.
Right, because they really have to take it all, big picture. And it sounds like, based on what Vanessa was saying and now how you're also adding layers to this, that it's really what you need to know about today is that there's the core inflation numbers and then there's the other data set. And those are two things that you have to take them all together.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And it points to the challenge for the Federal Reserve because of that dual make.
You have to take them together, and then you have to take a look at it from year over year and annualized. What's the projection for year end? And determine, is it above or below the 2% target? I mean, it's amazing just looking at these people on CNN and how they're not that sophisticated when it comes to like looking at the markets. And she doesn't even have her own thoughts. She literally is just regurgitating the individuals that are being interviewed on Bloomberg. This is why CNN failed during the crisis of 2020. This is why they failed during the sell-off in April. This is why they fail constantly. They have no real thought.
Day of employment and inflation, and we've seen them kind of talking about how they're favoring inflation. You hear Fed Chair Jay Powell talking about that 2% inflation target time and time again. When you start to see cracks in the labor market, if those get more severe, you could see the Fed transitioning to focus on the labor market and cutting rates to protect that labor market. And then, of course, we also have the tariff zooming in the background here and whether or not that's going to lead to any further cracks in the labor market as well.
And also, too, as Kate mentioned, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, has had their chief statistician fired because Trump didn't like the numbers. Their reaction will be very telling today. But just as someone who reads these numbers, the risk of politicizing these numbers has to be high.
It's certainly high, and that's why it's been so critical historically to have a nonpartisan Bureau of Labor Statistics. It's not just important for consumers who are understanding the economy. It's important for traders. It's important for my sources on Wall Street who are trading inflation protected securities to trust in this data. It's very critical for global markets. So that
they have tons of PhDs at BLS, and they still can't come up with a better econometric model to determine what the labor rate is, the labor force. They were on autopilot. That's the problem. And because their econometric models are deviating from reality and they haven't self-corrected, they haven't reparameterized their models, their revisions need to be adjusted more wildly. So that's the problem. This data here is a little bit, the models, the econometric models are a little bit closer to reality compared to the labor data.
Certainly going to be something we're covering going forward.
All right, Madison Mills, thank you so much.
So now 17 past the hour, let's get to news about your money. Consumer Price Index released earlier.
All right, let's go to Bloomberg. But before we do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. Boomer Boost has 68 nutrients. It has a very comprehensive compound profile. Read the label on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. But this will target multiple systems. It's going to target your cardiovascular system, your brain function, your musculature, your metabolism, your energy levels. Very important to take every day. Now, if you want to lose weight, you take this for your breakfast or for your lunch in soft foods or a smoothie. And do some exercise throughout the week. And you'll notice that you're losing weight safely and you're going to have a steady level of energy. If you don't want to lose weight, that's okay. Just take it with your food. All right. I take it with my hummus for my lunch. So, but take it once a day. It's a powder. You take 1 scooper a day. But this will help to bring down inflammation. It's going to help your body to have energy, and you'll have more vitality. You're going to be able to concentrate. You get rid of that brain fog, right? You're going to be able to get rid of that brain fog. You're going to be able to concentrate. You're going to be able to sleep better. You'll be more well rested. You're going to notice that over time, you're slowing down the aging process. Your body is healing. It's very important. This is powerful stuff. Take it every day. Use discount 5. You get $5 off any order. It stacks really well with Myotrol and the barley that I'll be talking about shortly here. But use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more on any order, you get a free gift until supplies last.
Hester Pierce will have analysis immediately following with Nathan Dean at Bloomberg Intelligence. And as core inflation warms up, we learned that this morning in the CPI. We'll review the data with Bloomberg economics editor Molly Smith. But first, Wall Street in a very good mood following the print here. Maybe there's more to it, including earnings. We start in New York, as always, with Charlie Pellet on the markets. Charlie, how's it look?
All right, now a lot of green on the screen, Joe Matthew. The core consumer price index increased by 0.3% from June, in line with economists' forecasts, and stocks are taking off. In fact, the S&P right now, best level of the session, up 55. That is a gain of just about 0.9%. We've got the Dow up 464, up 1.1%. The NASDAQ Composite Index up 210, up by 1%. 10-year 4.29%, the 2-year 3.73%, and spot gold up 0.2%, 33.48 the ounce. Recapping CPI Tuesday, stocks higher, S&P up 0.9. Balance of power kicks up now. Back we go to Washington once again. Here it is, Joe Matthew.
All right, Charlie, many thanks to Charlie Pellet. We'll have a more complete readout on the markets and all the headlines driving business today a little bit later on in the hour here. About 20 minutes from now, we'll check in with Charlie at Rose headquarters in New York. Thanks for being with us on Bloomberg Radio, on the satellite radio channel 121, and on YouTube. If you want to watch the radio on TV, and this would be a good time to do it as we prepare to hear from the new SEC commissioner, search Bloomberg Business News Live. CPI data, we're going to get into that, as I mentioned, a little bit later on with Molly Smith. The data here raising new questions about the trajectory of inflation. But we first want to hear from the big boss at the SEC, Hester Pierce, now in conversation on Bloomberg Crypto's TV program. Katie Greifeld holding forth in New York. Let's listen live now on Bloomberg.
Allow those retirement accounts to invest in private assets, to invest in crypto, or at least to allow it. How will the SEC approach this? What does that checklist look like?
Katie, it's great to be here. I think we've already started that process of opening the private markets to retail and thinking about ways that we can get them access in a way that's diversified, professionally managed, and consistent with their investing timeframes. And so I think we'll just continue with that work.
Appreciate that context. So as we continue on and as you approach this, talk us through some of the potential risks that you're thinking about, because certainly a lot of folks on Wall Street and elsewhere have been anticipating these rule changes, but there's also a lot of concern too about putting what are risky assets in retirement accounts.
Yes, I mean, I think those are legitimate concerns. What we've
seen, of course, is that the public markets are dominated by several large companies, and also companies are waiting longer to go public. And so we're looking for a way for retail to get earlier access to the growth of companies. And so that's really the goal of it. But of course, you want to do it in a way that makes sure that we're not just using retail as a dumping ground for bad assets. So I think it's making sure, again, that there's professional management, that it's done in a way that's careful, and that we're paying attention to the risks associated with it.
A conversation I've been having around this topic is about how this isn't as simple as switching a light switch necessarily, that you're not going to see private assets, you're not going to see crypto in retirement accounts overnight. You said that you've already started this process on your end, you're working through that checklist. What do you see as the timeline here?
Well, I mean, I think even already we have loosened. SEC made restrictions that really were not based in law on the percentage of private assets that could be available in retail accounts, in funds that are available to retail investors. So I think that process has begun. We have a new head of our Division of Investment Management, and he's working closely with the staff, and working also with people who have been thinking about how to do this in the private sector. So it's a combination of those things.
All right, well, appreciate the update there. Hope to keep talking about that, but I do want to move on, and I want to talk about tokenization. That obviously another big hot topic of the moment. And when we're talking about everyday investors getting involved with tokenization, what are some of the risks in your view that could potentially come about?
Well, I think there has been a lot of interest in tokenizing securities and other real world assets. And that's something that really opened up after the SEC changed its perspective on crypto. So we're seeing a lot of interest from traditional financial firms and native crypto firms. And there are different approaches that are being taken to tokenizing. So we will work with people. We're willing to work with people who are taking different approaches. But it's really important that people be very careful about disclosing what the nature of the asset is. When you tokenize something, it's still a security. If you're tokenizing a security, it may be a security with different characteristics, and that's something that needs to be conveyed to investors. And it's also important to be aware of sometimes their trading restrictions, or their restrictions on who can access particular types of securities. And so that's something people have to pay attention to.
And that's a point that you've made in the past, that tokenized securities are still securities. You do have some firms, I'm thinking of Robinhood, for example, rolling out tokenized stock trading. I believe that's taken hold in Europe. So, I mean, do you see that as a potential area where you could run into some of these confrontations over firms trying to really regulate and innovate and introduce measures such as that, but potentially coming up against some of these regulations that you're putting in place?
Well, without talking about any particular firm's approach, I think the bottom line is that we encourage firms to come in and talk to us. We expect that there will be some different approaches taken to tokenizing, and we're looking forward to working with folks to try those different models out and see what the market's like. And see whether or not tokenization of equity securities takes hold. I mean, that really will ultimately be up to the market. But what our message is that we're willing to work through different potential models with people.
Well, you said something interesting there. If tokenized equities take hold, and it's a good reminder that this is very nascent, that we're only just seeing the first few attempts at this come about. Should these tokenized real world assets, should tokenized equities really take off, should we expect a formal pilot program from the SEC for tokenized securities?
I think the pilot program, again, is more likely to look like multiple pilots with different people coming in and trying to do this in different ways. And again, we're not trying to be the picker of winners and losers, but letting the market decide. So really, we expect that there will be multiple options.
I do also want to talk about how you interact with some of the other regulatory bodies in DC. For a lot of folks, it's kind of like alphabet soup. You have the SEC, you also have the CFTC And I'm wondering how you work with the CFTC on crypto right now, if at all. What does that relationship look like?
We have a good relationship with the CFTC. We've worked with them. I personally have worked with the CFTC over the years on a number of issues, including security-based swaps. And so right now, both agencies are coming off the President's Working Group report recommendations. We're both trying to implement those recommendations, the ones that we can start already, absent market structure regulation legislation. And so we're coordinating with the CFTC on moving forward on those recommendations.
Well, to that point, one of the recommendations was that crypto exchanges and other crypto entities that are registered with the SEC, that they should have to pay transaction fees the same way that traditional brokerages do, for example. Do you agree with that?
I certainly understand that we need to have the fees fall on the people who are benefiting from the revenue of the fees. So I think that as the markets change, those changes should be reflected in fee revenue.
And Commissioner, you also brought up market structure. We know that crypto market structure bill is working its way through. The sense seems to be on the street that it faces a much tougher go-ahead than the stablecoin bill, for example. I would love to hear your thoughts there.
Well, I don't prognosticate about legislation any more than I do about where the markets might go in terms of which models of tokenization they might embrace. But I do think that the work has been really impressive on the part of the House, and the Senate is now looking at these issues. It's a very complicated piece of legislation to work out, but I think important, and we're happy to work with people in both the House and the Senate on trying to get it to the place where it will help to guide the shaping of the industry.
And just game planning here. Let's say that Congress isn't able to finish this market structure bill by November. What would that mean for the SEC and your approach to regulation?
I think one thing that's important to underscore is that we at the SEC are not waiting for legislation to work. We have a lot of work that we can do under the existing authority that we have, and we think that the President's Working Group report urged us to take those steps. And so we've been working since January on providing guidance about where the securities laws apply, and then where they do apply, helping firms to navigate those rules. And so that's something that we are hard at work on. We're working on rulemaking, and we think that what we do will be consistent with whatever market structure legislation comes out.
And Commissioner, do you want to talk a little bit about Project Crypto? I know that that's put together to help implement the Presidential Working Group's recommendations. How is that project going right now? What does that look like?
I mean, it's going very well. We're working very collaboratively with staff all across the Crypto Task Force is working collaboratively with staff across the building at the SEC. We are meeting with industry and with other interested parties. We're taking written comments as well, and we're putting that together into a package of reforms. As I said, we've already gotten some guidance out the door, but we are hoping to get some proposed rulemaking out the door as well.
Well, Commissioner, we really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the barley. I have heirloom barley and gladiator barley. Heirloom barley will detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, and soak up free radicals through superoxide dismutase. Now, taking heirloom barley every day is super important, because what you're going to start noticing is that you're going to have less inflammation, your joints are going to have less irritation, your immune system's going to be better, you're detoxifying your body, that's going to help with your endocrine system and your immune system. You're going to have less stress because it's going to be bringing down those free radicals. It stacks really well with C60. Take it every day. You take it with soft foods, filtered water, milk, or even a smoothie. In gladiator barley, you get the same benefits as the heirloom barley, but you get one additional benefit. So you get the benefits of detoxification, bringing down inflammation, soaking up free radicals. But if you do resistance training, you're going to be able to build muscle. This stacks really well with Miatrol. both stack well with Boomer Boost. So by taking Boomer Boost and the barley, you're helping with your A1C levels, especially if you take the Gladiator barley and you're doing resistance training. Because the more muscle you get, you're going to be able to reduce that insulin resistance. So it behooves you to take the Gladiator barley, do resistance training, and take the Boomer Boost. So those are the different supplements and how to mix and match them. Thank you for listening. Make sure that you go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video and all my videos. And by purchasing the products and stacking them the way I'm telling you to, you're going to slow down the aging process. You're going to have more vitality. You're going to help your different organ systems. Thank you for listening, and